morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Board of Supervisors special meeting for Calaveras County. Would you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? Thank you very much. At this time, do we have any announcements by board or staff before we get started? Seeing none, we'd like to welcome everybody here. Madam Clerk.
Thank you. Public comment. Any item of interest to the public that is within the subject matter jurisdiction of the board and is not posted on the consent or regular agendas may be addressed during the public comment period. California law prohibits the board from taking action on any matter which is not posted on the agenda unless it is determined to be an emergency by the Board of Supervisors. If public comment is completed before the 30-minute allotted time period, the board may immediately move to the next order of business. If public comment is not completed during the allotted time period, it will be continued as the last item of business in order to provide an opportunity for the remainder of comments to be heard.
Ladies and gentlemen, just so everybody's clear, this is a general public comment period. This is a time to bring up any topic that is not on today's agenda. There will be another item, special public comment period for each item on the regular agenda item. And any items that are pulled from the consent agenda will have public comment also. So if you're here to talk about a topic or item that is on today's agenda, for instance, marijuana, please wait till we get to that item's specific public comment period to address the board. I now welcome public comments on topics not on today's agenda. Please step forward. And once again, folks, I want to commend you for how our meetings have been run recently. I think that it shows the character of this county when we're respectful towards each other, and I wish we'll continue that. I personally want to thank everybody here and the board members and staff. So, public comment period's now open.
Good morning, Marty Crane. I serve as a secretary for the In-Home Supportive Services Advisory Committee, and we've had quite some discussions lately, and to clarify the flow chart, if you will, the roles and responsibilities, which is an ongoing work that the committee is working on. And but some comments were made after the last meeting, which I thought was very clear, made very clear by this board, that maybe it isn't as clear to everyone as it needs to be. So I created a little flow chart to help, not with all the answers and not with all the arms and legs of this IHSS In-Home Supportive Services program, but with this delineation of roles. So I made some copies, and perhaps so of course you know that you are the governing board for the In-Home Supportive Services program, which includes Health and Human Services, and in that is the IHSS program, Supportive Services program that, and you'll see in the center box that they serve the consumers, okay? And on the left, you see public authority. They serve the providers. They're the employer of record. And on the right, you see In-Home Supportive Services Advisory Committee. We are accountable solely to the Board of Supervisors, our governing board. And the Advisory Committee reviews and evaluates all aspects of IHSS, and with that information, provides ongoing advice and recommendations to their governing board, Board of Supervisors, and all other IHSS-related agencies. So I just wanted to show this, that while public authority and in-home supportive services, by virtue of the work that they do find areas where they need to work together. It's beneficial for them to work together. The advisory committee, by virtue of the work that we do, means that if we're going to review and evaluate, we've got to be out here separate and not controlled in any way by the people that we are reviewing. So, thank you. So I just wanted to show that we've given you a flow chart before that has bubbles everywhere and lines going everywhere, and it has to do with the money and the process as well. But I thought this might clarify it just a little bit to show that the advisory committee's over here. We answer to you only. And so we definitely need your support.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Any further public comment by anybody?
Good morning, Board. Well, it's another Tuesday. It's another meeting. It's another delay. It's another study session. It's more dithering. 5 months after the will of the Board was clearly expressed back in January, we don't appear to be any closer to the end than we were in January. In the meantime, this dithering, this delay, for whatever reason, whatever motivation, for whatever agenda it serves, has virtually guaranteed that all of the citizens of this county are going to have to endure another grow season of marijuana. If we can't move this thing forward, and I'm not talking about, Mr. Chairman, the content of today's...
Mr. McManus, would this be proper to discuss this during the agendized item?
I don't believe so, sir. I'm not talking about the content of the agenda item. I'm talking about the purpose of this meeting in general.
Okay, I'll allow that.
Thank you.
I'll give him back 10 seconds. Okay, thank you.
I've got what?
I gave you money. I gave you time back.
Oh, okay, thank you. All I want to say is we have studied and talked a lot on the subject for years now. What else do we need to know? What else is undiscovered that's going to make a big difference? I ask that the majority of this board reassert its will and move this thing forward to a quick and successful conclusion for the benefit of the citizens of Calaveras County. We don't need to talk about this anymore. I don't think there's anyone here that doesn't know all the issues and what's at stake. Thank you.
Rapana Randall Smith, District 3 voter. Thanks to Mr. Bill here. I just want to bring to everyone's attention, just yesterday on the Calaveras Enterprise was posted some information about the elections, and it was entitled, "There is no voter mandate for a ban from any district." And what was reported there were actual numbers from the elections office that made it very clear. Mr. Mills, you claim that you represent 3,700 to 4,000 voters in this hall a couple of weeks ago. You actually were elected by 1,758 voters. In your district, Measure C got 3,348 votes, twice as many as you got. There is no mandate for you to vote for a ban from your committee, from your district. Same for you, Mr. Clapp. You received 1,186 voters from your district versus 2,796 for Measure C. The voters have spoken for taxation and therefore regulation. There is no voter mandate for a ban. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
James Walker from Murphy's. I just want to talk about the conduct in this room for a minute. I do agree with Mr. Oliveira that last meeting was a breath of fresh air compared to a lot of what's happened in this room. I just want to point out to people there's kids in here today, and when I spoke the last meeting, mine were at home watching. And everybody in here, you're being filmed, you know. My son, my daughters were a little bit disturbed by the hand waving, and one of my daughters said, this kind of reminds me of stuff that happened in Salem during the witch trials, when the little girls would start waving their arms about and flailing when anyone wanted to make a point. So I just want to remind everybody, you know, everyone's watching. It's not just happening in this room. There's little ones at home. My daughter just won the trip to D.C. through FFA and started taking a little bit more interest in government. And, you know, when we talk about what we're going to say during opening, and then it flips right back to it kind of shows a little bit of a mix-up in our board and our government sometimes. So I just want everyone to be aware. The second time I spoke last time, I actually got hissed and kind of waved on my way back out. It shouldn't be how we're conducting ourselves. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to ask if you plan on speaking, if you'll rise and stand in the back so we can get full participation in our 30 minutes.
Okay, I'm Pastor Trent Fiorino from McCallum Hill Community Church. I reside in Gary Toffanelli's district, District 1. And I heard the gentleman came up here to tell you guys that there was no mandate for this ban. I saw something this morning as a pastor that I know is nearly impossible. And that's to get believers from churches to come together, different churches to come together and band together. We had over 45 people band together this morning out front praying for this ban. Members from every single district were represented. So don't tell us, we don't want to hear that there's no mandate. There is a mandate. The people of this county want this stuff gone. So I'm telling all of you there is a mandate. And also I'm telling you that the handcuffs have been taken off the churches by the President of the United States. We can now speak out and speak against people when it comes time for election. And I guarantee those that were elected to stand for a ban and sit back and do nothing, the pastors are going to get out there and they are going to voice their opinion to their churches. They're going to get the signatures. They're going to be right on top of the recall elections for some of you. You know who you are. You know that who voted you in. You know there's some of you up here. I see one shaking his head a little bit. That my wife spoke to personally, guaranteed us that he was in favor of the ban and now is wavering. You're going to hear from us. We're not going to be silent.
Thank you, sir.
Good morning. I love the way the flags are. It's the United States flag, then the California flag's a little bit lower. But that's not what was out at the gazebo. The California flag was above the United States flag. I guess that's what Calaveras County wants to do. Put California first. At the expense of its population, of its children, and it breaks my heart. And I just hope that we will all see what's happening, and that, you know, people are trying to make a living, and I understand that. I learned to have a lot of compassion for the people that are growing marijuana, and I understand how they feel. But I also understand that there's a whole lot of other people out there that were here first, and they didn't have this going on, and now it's taken over our county. And like I said, I have compassion for everyone, but I think this is going to destroy us, our country, our state, and our county.
Thank you.
Broadcasters from Valley Springs. I have a peach tree on my property, just one. Every spring, the peaches come out and the branches begin to droop almost to the ground. And life is good. It really looks good. But a few years ago, I learned the hard way that there's a finite time to harvest those peaches. If you remember the Hitchcock movie, The Birds, there's a scene where somebody says, the birds are all acting together. And the old professor says, why, if they did that, we'd stand no chance. Well, a few years ago, on June 20th, I went to bed with a full peach tree. And on the 21st, I awoke, and there was no flesh on the trees, nothing but pits hanging from the trees. The birds had, as if operating in concert, descended on my property and in one night had eaten every bit of every flesh of every peach. And the next day, and so my life changed from, great, I got lots of peaches, to, oh, I got no peaches. Now, this might seem like an irrelevant story, but we do have obstacles in our path. And if any of you are wavering, you should be wavering, because a 3-2 vote serves no one. When there are things coming that we should be able to see, today in Nevada, a judge is going to rule on a suit by liquor industry saying no one should be able to sell marijuana in Nevada but us. We don't know how he's going to rule. If we have a series of 3-2 votes, we'll go one way this time, then one person will get voted out and go 3-2 the other way, then somebody else will get voted out and go 3-2 the other way. There is a third way, and you've got to find it. I can't tell it to you in 3 minutes. I probably can in 15 minutes. And so I'll conclude by saying I intend to present that third way, if people don't seek it out on their own first, in an appeal to an eventual planning commission ruling that will establish a ban. But when I appealed the disastrous asphalt plant 3-2 decision, it cost $100. At the very next meeting, the same three on the old board voted 3-2 to raise the appeal fee to $600, which really leaves a marijuana grower easy to afford it, but a regular citizen can't. I urge you to change that rule back. Don't even need them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Ellen Acosta. I live in District 2, and I just wanted to stop and say I can't come to these meetings usually because I'm working. I represent a family of 5 and probably a lot more that are against the ban, for the ban. They don't want the commercial marijuana in the county. I stated that in a letter to the board, and thank you, Dennis. You're the only one that responded. I appreciate that very much. And I just wanted to get up and say I know that I represent a lot more families that do not want commercial grow in Calaveras. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further public comment, speakers?
Morning. This is opening public comment. Is that what this is? Not on the agenda item?
Not on the agenda item, sir.
Oh, okay. Because I'm a little confused. That's all I've been hearing is what's been on the agenda item. So.
Yeah, we're attempting to.
I want to talk about our economy in Calaveras County. Since I'm a business owner here, I own a business. I get affected by it every day, every week. For years, I have watched businesses come and go. A couple of business owners downtown get all stressed out and pass away because their business is going under. This is 3, 4, 5 years ago. We have contractors that, if you want to get something built around here right now, it's a month out or 2 months out right now, because we don't have contractors in this county anymore that can put together a crew to work on something. They have to wheel their way around it. A couple of years ago, the economy started looking a little better. And that's kind of where we are right now. If you want to affect that in a negative manner, you're going to do that today probably. But I'm telling you that we've shut this county down for so long on every industry, even a golf course. Nothing can come in this county unless a certain few people, and it isn't the government, say they can. So I got to tell you that doesn't seem like the American way to me. We're supposed to be a society that brings that helps people succeed in things. If we got problems and we need to figure out a way to make it happen and be safe and look out for the rest of the county and protect our property rights, I know some people don't believe in property rights, but I do, then that's what we should be doing as a government. That's what we should be doing. Property rights. Everything you do here will affect it. Everything. Thank you.
Thank you.
Al Segala. I'm speaking for myself, and I kind of agree with Cliff on his main points. It's hard. It's difficult for me when people threaten me to adopt what the thinking they want me to think, and I got a suspicion that you're probably the same way. If somebody seeks to intimidate you or to threaten you, to make you go against what seems to be logical and right and proper, I think you would have a tendency to resist that. Well, on the positive side, I'd like to compliment the sheriff. One of the things we had going on here was a lot of applause for this side or that side, and might come up with the idea of shaking hands like this. And I didn't think that would work, but it did. I looked around and I see these people shaking their hands. If somebody saw this on the camera and didn't know the background of why they're doing that, they'd probably think we're nuts. But anyway, I want to thank you for conducting a fair and balanced hearing.
Thank you.
Good morning, Board. Gina Gonzalez, Bar 20, Angels Camp. District 4, to be specific. Very proud to be underneath the Dennis Mills umbrella. He's done very, very outgoing things for our community. He stands for what he believes in. He stands for what I believe in. Clyde Clapp, thank you. I'm very proud to say that you're my friend. A belated Father's Day wish to all you guys. Happy Father's Day. And I would like to say that I read the grand jury report, and I'm a little confused, but I know that you guys all discussed the grand jury, and I have a friend that runs animal services, and you guys are way off. They need help in that department, as many do. The animal services department has now lost 2 people. They're understaffed. If you have a barking dog, you're done. Too bad, sorry. If you have a grower that has an illegal grow with a pit bull that just attacked your horse, which happened in my neighborhood, so sorry, we'll get to you when we can. And that's not their fault. That's up to you guys. You guys need to really reevaluate him and talk to his department in serious conditions. He is only one person. He's now down quite a few people. And it's because the number 1 payroll is terrible. I wouldn't do what they have to do and go to a complaint for a dog bite. They're in jeopardy of their safety, number 1. Number 2, the payroll that they get is ridiculous. And we know we're in a budget crisis. We understand that. I have a budget in my own household. But we need to find funding. We need a water slide here. We need something to bring people here. We need a wine fest. We need something here. Tuolumne has tourism, but they also have casinos. We don't want that kind of people, but you know what? We get that kind of money. Amador, they have casinos. We don't need marijuana to make us who we are. We're Calaveras County. We're Calaveras strong. And I'm proud to say that I don't want a ban. And my face is a target for many, many growers, believe me. And you know what I do? I walk up to them and say, prove to me why I should allow you in my community. So that's why I just wanted to say that, and you guys have a good day.
Thank you. Any further speakers? Okay.
Good morning, Chair, Mr. Calaveras, supervisors and staff. My name is Jackie McGowan, and I'm a consultant in the cannabis industry. I want to talk today about making mistakes. As humans, we are flawed, and being wrong isn't anything to be ashamed of. It's what we do once we realize we're wrong that matters. When I first began attending meetings here, I made several mistakes. I've probably made more than half of this room upset with me over how I've handled issues. The first of my regretful actions occurred during the registration process. I had taken a picture of your staff counting cash and then posted it on social media. When I found out that this upset some people, I immediately took steps to correct this. I removed the picture and then approached both of those staff members to tell them that I was wrong for what I had done. I acknowledged I didn't have their permission to do this and apologized to both of those members. The next mistake I made was in the creation of a video mocking your sheriff. I also posted that on social media with a not-so-friendly title. Although it took me a little bit longer to realize that this action was hurtful, I did eventually come to my senses and remove that video as well. I then sought out Mr. DiBasilio and told him I was wrong for doing this and asked him if he could forgive me. Although it may be embarrassing to admit when one is wrong, it's what responsible adults do. Today could be the day that you, Mr. Supervisor Mills, admit that you have made a mistake. I do not doubt that when you were in the midst of running your campaign that you believed that you could find the money to fund a ban. I think everyone is aware now that this isn't a reality. It's okay to say that you've made a mistake, that you thought you could find the money and now realize that you cannot. What's not okay is continuing to mislead the public by holding steadfast to this unachievable goal. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bill Wilson, District 1. Wow, no waiting. That's kind of nice. Anyway, first off, I want to thank Public Works for doing a bang-up job on Pool Station Road. Unfortunately, this has caused more problems. People now decided that they would be able to use this as a raceway. They don't have to pay attention to the potholes. Therefore, they run into sheriff's cars. Just another unfortunate problem. Anyway, the other thing I'd like to bring up this morning is misappropriation of funds and malfeasance. Gentlemen, malfeasance in England is a lifetime sentence. Just something to consider before we start banning something that the voters voted for. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers for public comment? Okay, seeing none, Madam Clerk.
Item 1 is from the Administrative Office to receive a report regarding the Sheriff Department fiscal year 2017-18 budget request.
Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be taking a scheduled break at 10 o'clock.
I look over at Supervisors Toffanelli and Mills if they wanted to provide an update first, or if they wanted me to provide a summary of our meeting with the Sheriff's Department yesterday.
I would prefer that you go ahead and report out what we had, and if there's a need to fill in background information, that we can do that afterwards.
I agree.
We had a pretty long meeting yesterday with the Sheriff's Office, with the Sheriff, Captain Macedo, and also the Sheriff's business administrator, their finance person, to look through their budget request to try and identify areas where we could save funds, or I guess look at in terms of they have vacant positions now, how much salary savings do we expect between the July 1 date and the time that those positions are filled. Trying to make some assumptions on whether we're going to be able to fill jail staff timely through this recruitment. They have a number of vacancies in the jail, whether they'll be able to get some of the deputy positions on board quickly, and they also have a number of deputy positions that are going through the academy now, and there's kind of a staggered time frame for some of those positions to come in. Certainly we did identify some opportunity for salary savings from doing that, and I think the sheriff's department was going through and reviewing that, and I'm expecting them to provide an updated list or number for us this afternoon so we can plug it into my working sheet that then will populate our final budget for next week when I bring that to the board for requested approval. A couple lingering items still out there, still some significant concern voiced from the Sheriff's Department on using staffing with the AB 443 funding. I don't think we got to a resolution at that point other than continuing as budgeted, not using positions within those funds. I would also note on a tangent, I have been having meetings with a number of departments, including probation, including district attorney. I know my office has also been meeting with the building department, planning, and environmental health to try and identify areas across the board where we can try and reduce costs and bring us back to a balanced budget without relying heavily on a position freeze to get there. My goal starting out this process was to try and get us to a point where we could avoid having to freeze positions. I'm not certain at this point that we're going to get there. I feel that I'm close, but we still have a significant hole to overcome to really get us there. And so I'm continuing to work with departments through the remainder of this week in anticipation of getting the budget to the board next Tuesday.
Supervisor Mills?
Quite honestly, I would like to grab my whiteboard, but how am I going to do that and be able to use the microphone at the same time? I know that there are people out there that are visual learners instead of audible learners, but maybe what I can do is go through this audibly, and if you'd like to have me throw it up on a whiteboard, I'll be glad to do it. But you're going to hear a few things today that give you some idea of what I really know. In the designated funds for the Sheriff's Department last year, this is in 2015, the total was $3,160,998. Designated funds, ladies and gentlemen, are reserves. That's cash money sitting there. In 2016, as of February 31st of 2017, that fund balance grew to $4,659,705. That's a $1,500,000 increase in one calendar year of funds that are in the Sheriff's Department's designated funds list that are sitting there. I just want to repeat that. Number two, I said a while ago that the cost of turnover, and I've done calculations on this because of my business background, was $1.13 million. Now, I've been confirmed that that's a low number. It's actually about $1.3 million turnover costs per year. When we add in on top of that the overtime costs. Now, we just recently, over this last 6 months, approved, was it $466,000 in additional overtime out of our general fund. So overtime has a play in this. But also some other ancillary costs is when you work people beyond their capacity and the stress levels, you create turnover. And when you put people in those positions, you create workman's comp claims. You create illness days. There's all of a sudden your whole staffing system starts to come apart. If the issue is that we don't have enough funding, in other words, these people are not paid a so-called living wage for their positions, the amount of money when you add in the $1.5 million for reserve fund increases, $1.5 million on turnover, on the other costs, and then add in your turnover costs, overtime, you put it all together, and suddenly you come up with some pretty substantial numbers. I would like to see from this, and here's another, maybe it's an aha moment. If you have a position open, and the sheriff's fully aware of this, it doesn't mean that he can fill it tomorrow. And that's a problem. If we close off positions based upon our turnover rates that we have now, the amount of time it takes for him to put that position back into a fully functional status could be anywhere up to 2 years. 2 years. You can't shut off positions knowing you have this kind of turnover. So I left that meeting yesterday saying we need to set some goals. We need an action plan. If we're spending $1.3 million in turnover, well, what if we cut the turnover cost in half? We diverted that money to positions. We diverted that money towards better pay rates. What about the overtime? Would that go down as well? So let's have a goal on reducing the overtime. You see, there's a lot of things out there in budgets that drive the final result. And I'm not really in favor of the idea of cutting positions. I don't think that's what this discussion's all about. I think this discussion's about how do we improve the working conditions of the Sheriff's Department, provide him the staff that he needs and the time that he needs it. And that's a good example, because we talked about this yesterday, where you have future deputies going through right now. They aren't needed in the system until December, roughly? Yeah, end of November. End of November, December. So if we budget that as a full position for the entire period, we're in essence having a salary savings for July, August, September, October. What could I do with that money? Does it have to be salary, or could we possibly budget him for a couple of new cars? You see, it's all called just-in-time budgeting, using money and allocating money in a timely way, in a way that you need it. But when I see these kind of overtime costs, and I see these turnover costs, and I see the workman comp claims, that screams at me that we need to change our direction. And it isn't just in this department. Like I said, when I started this budget, I read what our CAO wrote here at the beginning. And then I flipped the budget over because I think the sheriff's was the first one they wanted to talk about. Do I care? You're damn right I do. Okay? This is what it's all about. It's right here. I've done budgets for so many years that this is simple stuff. But we need to get our head around goals, and that's why I wanted to have that retreat early in the spring so we could establish those goals and establish clearly from this board that the Sheriff's Department and public safety is a priority, and we work from there. And I think that from that meeting, we're going to continue. We'll continue to have other meetings, and we'll get this worked out. And I appreciate the effort that Captain Macedo and Maria coming there and sitting down and talking to us, and everybody kind of getting an understanding of just exactly where we're at. But the last thing we need to do is close off positions, knowing full well that your time lag is so immense in making this happen. And we're just talking about a deputy. We're not even talking about a corporal or sergeant. You know, it just gets even worse from there. So I just want everybody to understand. It may sound complex. If you want me to get up there on a whiteboard and write it out, I will. But it's fixable. And I don't see any of this as not fixable. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Mills. Supervisor Tofinelli?
Well, I just add a few things. And again, thank you, Sheriff and Captain Macedo and Maria for meeting with us. It was quite a long meeting. I think it lasted a couple hours at least. We went over very many things. And Supervisor Mills, I fully understand where you're coming from. I just caution you on some of these designated funds. You can spend them now, but at some time they're designated for a reason, and that's going to come due. So very carefully as we go through this and try and make ends meet here to get where we want the sheriff to get and probation and the DA, that we don't rob from Peter and then later on we have to pay Paul somewhere and the money's gone because we've used it. So that you have to keep in mind as we go through all of this, because although they are there and we've been carrying them, at some point they're designated for something and they will come due.
I fully agree, and I think we started to settle in on what numbers would be acceptable within those fund balances to ensure stability. But I just wanted to indicate that those funds are there. It's not a matter, because like AB 443 funds, those have limited scopes. And as long as we know that, and we're aware that it's there, how much of that have we got to play with? What is the differential we can work with?
Exactly.
So I appreciate your comment on it.
Okay. Further comments on the meeting? Any further comments from the board or staff on this item, agenda item?
Just a quick question, Mr. Chair. At the last board meeting, we seemed to have we had concerns that the hole was bigger than we thought it was. Did that bear to be true, or what did you guys discover?
We didn't discuss
Just
different departments. We just met with the sheriff to try and get his budget in line so we can all be on the same page.
okay. I wasn't sure whether that was in the budget. Okay.
I think the CAO, Tim, was working on that, meeting with the DA and the probation officer.
And I think part of the question on the whole, and this goes back to the position control and master position allocations, is that some of these positions that appear to be general funded are in fact grant funded, and are you impacting the general fund as directly by doing a freeze versus if it's grant funded, you're just taking away ability to spend down those grant funds. And part of that is that broader discussion of where do you allocate positions, grant-funded positions versus general-funded positions, and strategically try and make sure that you're maximizing the use of your general fund dollar. That feeds into, I think, the broad discussion that we're having across the board with departments.
And to that end, and the folks sitting here on the dais are fully aware of my mantra, is that this is the first budget that I've received that did not have a position control list. And this is the first budget that I received that I did not have a working designated funds list that I could really mirror money moving from here to there kind of thing. So those were two critical pieces, I think, that we've learned from that. And we'll go forward next year and have maybe a little different outlook. So.
Good morning. Good morning. Excuse me. Good morning.
Excuse me.
Sheriff.
Sheriff. I think Supervisor.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'll just be very brief. I just want to make sure that on the 27th, when we have this continued discussion, do we have sufficient time to get through the items that we've got to get through?
I definitely think so. I mean, 27th, we have to have a budget together. For me, it's trying to negotiate and work with departments this week to come to more or less a compromise position on freezing positions versus what realistically, based on how departments are operating, do we expect in salary savings and other opportunities to reduce general fund draws on contracts or other types of activities that then really start to shrink that hole.
I just want to make sure that, and this is,
No,
it's a big deal. Just want to make sure we.
Yeah, my apologies for one thing, just for a moment, if you don't mind, is that this is the statutorily required spot that we've got to put a budget together, and we've got to have it there by that date. That is the beginning point, and we've got from then until September 27th to work out the details of how that final budget will look. So there is a 90-day window that I think that if the CAO, and this is just something that I think we need to discuss at some point, and maybe a couple of supervisors, the auditor, and other people sit down and just go through some of these individual departments and try to find out exactly what we've got and how we're providing these services and what it's costing. So this is just the beginning point. I don't want anybody to think this is the final. It's not.
Supervisor Tofanelli, did you have a further comment?
Not at this time.
Sheriff, thank you very much for being patient.
You're the boss. It's your house.
Right.
I just wanted the other board members to understand about the designated funds. A lot of those designated funds are grant funds that come into the department that are specific, like Supervisor Toffenelli talked about. They're set up for our Comanche, our Maloney's, our OHV, and those other units. So those are designated funds. So when you see those, the increase in the funding is for those positions that are grant funded. So like you said, you can't rob Peter to pay Paul. However, on the flip side of that, as Supervisor Mills said, I have a lot of positions in our department that are unfilled. They are funded positions, but they are unfilled. And I've come up with about almost $500,000 worth of salary savings to the county for those positions that are unfilled. I have people coming out of the academy at the end of November, so they will take some of those positions that are unfilled right now with the salary savings. I have positions in the jail that the board gave me 8 months ago. A lot of those, 5 of those positions that they gave us, I haven't been able to completely fill for the simple fact of our turnover rates. So those positions, although that money is allocated for us, those positions were unfilled. So that is a salary savings. And moving forward in the 17-18 budget, same thing. It depends on when I can get those positions filled on how much salary savings you're going to have. We sat down the other day, estimated you're going to be close to $500,000 in salary savings for those positions that are unfilled right now. They're budgeted, but that money is not going to be used. So for the county to utilize those money elsewhere, buying cars or whatever the case may be, great. Can use some of that money to pay my overtime that we're going to incur because we're short-staffed. So I just want to make sure you're clear about the positions and the availability of those funds because of the positions that are unfilled and the reasoning behind the designated funds and why those costs are shown that they're higher.
Sheriff, my greatest concern is that when you fill those positions, we in essence stop the hiring process to any future positions that may be required because of turnover. That is a problem. And that we need to be able to maintain open positions, even though you filled back here. Right. Not that we funded it, but we have an open position from which you can drive to replace for future anticipated turnover. We have to anticipate it at this point because the trending is there.
Right, and the statistics don't lie that we have a turnover rate in our department. And, for instance, when November rolls around, if I don't have anybody leave, which I can tell you right now, I have one person in background somewhere else, and I have one that's going to be retiring in September. So there's 2 open positions right there. If I am not able to continue recruiting when those 2 guys go, you're looking at between 17 and 25 months from the time we send out applications to the time we can say, okay, you're now a deputy. You're looking at over 2 years, like you talked about. And we talked about having a couple of control positions specifically for the continual hiring process so that we're not getting behind. The concern I have with the freeze is that if you freeze us for 6 months, that puts me 25 months plus 6 months behind in trying to get deputies hired. So it's not good for us and for the county because these are people that are out there to protect the county. So we need to put that process in place. And Toffenelli had a great idea, which I hope we can move forward with, in having those 2 recruit positions because they are fairly inexpensive to recruit that way.
And the cost that we talked about to put them through the academy.
It's like $20,000.
So we talked about having those positions and him having those going through the academy. So
right.
Yeah.
So for, say, $50,000 in budgeted items for 2 positions, it just keeps those positions open, keeps them functional, keeps HR in the process, and the entire cycle will keep moving forward. If we just freeze out now, and that was really the takeaway from yesterday, is we can't really totally freeze out. What we need to look at, though, is funded positions that are unfilled and realize what those salary savings are, right. But be able to provide you with the salary when you need that position active.
Correct. And again, you have the salary savings. Every time you use the word freeze, it makes me shiver because you're trying to stop me from that continual process to keep deputies on the street.
Well, let's change the word.
I'd be all happy with that.
Okay.
Anything else?
Thank you for the conversation. I think that it's important that there be a level of confidence and trust that the board and the staff understands that we are trying to work this out together. This is not a mandate from here pushing out. It's got to be a conversation back and forth as to how do we make this a better place for everyone, employees as well in this county.
And I think that was why it was important for us to show you that we do have these salary savings, that the county can save that money, because it's imperative to what we've got going on. So, thank you.
Thank you, Sheriff. Further comment by the board? Any comment by staff? We'll open up to public comment on this particular item.
House of Gala Taxpayer Association, and good work, Dennis. It seems like it's important to change fundamentals. We have a problem of attracting law enforcement personnel because our salaries are not competitive with other similar counties. Okay, we get people, we train, and once they're trained, then they can go work for some place where they can make more money. This process is continuing and continuing. I've been told that part of the reason is the collective bargaining system where the employer is supposed to look for the lowest pay and the unions are supposed to go for the highest pay, and in this mix of negotiation, you come up with something. Well, I think you need to bypass that. If it's possible, you need to talk to our attorney, but perhaps an MOU could be established with the unions without collective bargaining, outside of collective bargaining, to immediately match the patrolman salaries to the competing counties. And then also existing patrolmen. In the case of existing patrolmen, you could probably phase that maybe over 3 years or some amount of time to be a little easier on the budget. Well, what would happen there would be correcting all the basic problems that you have. It's going to take a couple of years, as the sheriff mentioned, before you actually have the final results. But if you start right now, no more delay, you'll be going in the right direction. So the big question is, can you do this? If you can do this, our taxpayer group recommends that you do so. And the plot thickens. Being competitive with in salaries with competing jurisdictions on certain types of employment needs to be done. But also there's other types of employment that are competitive with local employment in the private sector. Those should follow the same thing. You should match, not pay more than what the local salary wage is. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Will Moore from Rancho Calaveras, District 5, and I don't pretend to understand all of this, but this is what I think I heard, that the county has, through means unmentioned, gained $1.5 million of new revenue, and that Mr. Mills wants to combine this new revenue with theoretical savings and less overtime and fewer disability claims to spend on a marijuana ban. Thank you.
Thank you.
Morning, Cliff
Mr.
Benson,
Edson,
District 1.
I think we had the gentleman stand up for, okay, you've been given the go-ahead.
Thanks. He gave me the go-ahead.
Okay.
I want to just make some comments on the sheriff's budget. Before I left office, it was clear that the sheriff's office is about 10% underpaid for their salaries. And that would be a goal to reach, if we could do that. They've always had a problem keeping people here working. There's been quite a few disabilities. This is not easy, an easy part of the country to work in. There's you know, when you have a call in Arnold, somebody's got to rush from, you know, maybe over in Mountain Ranch area to get up there, and then you don't have backup, so you only have one person at a time there, which is dangerous. That's dangerous for the officers, and they do the very best that they can. They do very good work here. But I only know one way to raise money for them, and you can go through the budget all you want and think that you can move money around and try to make up for it. If you take something from somewhere, it's taken from somewhere else or somebody else's budget. That's the decision you're going to make, period. Can you find savings in salaries? Yeah, you can, but it's not that much. Even for a 10% increase to make it enticing enough to keep people here, you're going to spend about $4 million a year, plus the increases on PERS. That's what it's going to cost. So you got to have, like any job, if I want to go out and buy new things for my restaurant, guess what? I got to increase my revenue. That's how I got to do it. Got to work for it. And you got to find ways to increase your revenue. We have the Butte fire, which took a lot from us, and now we have tree mortality. That's going to take a lot from us, and that's going to severely affect our tourism dollars. So you guys have a tough job. There's no doubt about it. But robbing Peter to pay Paul, not going to work.
Thank you.
Ben Stopper, District 5. So from what I understand there, we started out with $1.5 million, but we moved back down to $500,000 that comes from the general fund that's not restricted for grants and such things. So that's $500,000. Also, at the same time here in the last year, that was approved for almost $500,000 in overtime. So at that point, I see 500 negating the other 500,000. To move on, this is good conversation. This is the conversation that we need to have back and forth between the people and the sheriffs, the supervisors, you know, ideas going back and forth. At the same time, as being a supervisor in your position, you guys are the bosses of the CAO, the department heads that are appointed, and then you are not the boss of the sheriff. You're not the boss of the people that work underneath the department heads or the CAO. You give direction. What the board wants these people to move forward on doing. So keep that in mind. Micromanaging does not work. Thank you.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, this will be the last speaker. Then we'll be taking our break.
Bill Wilson, District 1. I believe a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago, Mr. Lutz said that we sent out $8.5 million in taxes under a new measure that was voted on by the people, Measure C, last November. That was to raise funds on commercial cannabis, manufacturing, and dispensaries. The voters overwhelmingly adopted this. You people are looking for new money. My God, you've got it. How much money is in that fund right now that those people have paid in taxes so far? $1 million, $2 million, $3 million? You are the only ones that know. That's not public record yet. You haven't said. But $8.5 million in the first installment, $17 million the first year. Double that again. That's $34 million in 2 years by the time you guys are elected again. If you're elected again. Thank you.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be taking our break now, 15 minutes, and we'll resume with public comment on this agenda item. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're back. We'd like to welcome Rebecca Turner, our clerk for the county. She'll be sitting in as board clerk. And we'll continue with public comment. Is there any more public comment regarding this agenda item, sheriff's budget meeting? Seeing no one, we'll go back to Madam Clerk. There we go.
Start over? All right. Item number 2, the Planning Department conduct a special study session to continue discussion of cannabis cultivation in Calaveras County, focusing on comments to the draft EIR for the proposed ordinance to ban cultivation and commercial activities associated with cannabis.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board, Peter Maurer, Planning Department. This is a continued discussion of the cannabis issue. The last meeting, members of the board were referring to a workshop that some of you had went to with CSAC, I believe, where you talked about some of the most important part of the work that you do is a discussion between yourselves. And I think that's this part of the meeting now, is the discussion among yourselves. We also had a request to have a look at the comments. We've posted them on our website. It's a stack about this thick. That did not include the 6,000 pages of attachments we got on one comment letter. 64 comments altogether, broad range of comments from I support the ban or I want regulation to very lengthy comments on specific components of the EIR itself. So we'll be working with our consultants, outside counsel, as well as in-house counsel on responding to those comments over the next several weeks. And once that's done, have the responses to comments in the final EIR available for review and then hearings before the Planning Commission, ultimately your board. But right now, just turn it back over to you to continue your discussion of direction that we've been given to proceed with this issue.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Maurer. So just so everybody's clear, we will not be discussing the EIR at this meeting until after the review period?
Well, there really isn't anything to discuss at this point in time. Okay. We have to review those comments. We have to look at them closely to see, what did they say? Are they legitimate issues? Did we not address an issue sufficiently? Is there differing opinions, technical opinions over certain issues? An example would be if we had a traffic study that said one thing, but another traffic study said something else, then we need to sort of look at those two issues. So there's a lot of technical work that needs to be done at this point in time. The comments are available on our website. We've posted them for the public can see. But ultimately, we will respond to every point that's made in those comments in one manner or another. In some cases, it may just be comment noted. There's no real additional information to be provided. It's just someone's opinion or someone's statement of what they believe is fact. In other cases, someone may raise an issue that says, well, why didn't you look at this? And then we will say, oh, that's a good point, and here's additional information on that issue. Or we disagree with your conclusion on this finding, and then we would either provide information to support our finding of why we felt it was significant or less than significant, or add additional information to respond to those comments. So that's the next step in this process.
Okay, just so everyone's clear, can you give us an estimated timeline?
I sort of hesitate to do that. Typically, something like this is several weeks. And it just really, I need to sit down with the consultants and our counsel to see what it's going to take to do that. I haven't had a chance to do that yet because it just closed last week. So we're reviewing it right now, and it's going to take some time just to read through all of those comments and sort of bracket them. Here, at each different issue, in some cases, the comment letter could contain several dozen different comments. And so you have to look at each one of those comments and then decide how are we going to respond to those. So that's going to take some time. But we've got several weeks of work to do.
Thank you, Mr. Maurer. With that, I'll bring it back to the board. Supervisor Tofinelli.
Yeah, Mr. Maurer, I've continuously heard comments that this was a tactical delay. There's no reason for an EIR for the ban. Can you explain in somewhat detail as to why we went down the process of an EIR in conjunction with this ban ordinance?
Certainly. Without disclosing conversations that we've had in closed session about the discussions that we had on protecting the county's interest in potential future litigation, whenever the county adopts an ordinance, whatever the ordinance is, we need to address CEQA, California Environmental Quality Act. And the safest way to do so is through an EIR. Knowing how controversial this issue is, a challenge to CEQA, if you do a negative declaration, which is a finding that there would be no significant impact, or even a mitigated negative declaration, which says that if you have, there are potentially significant impacts, but if you add these mitigation measures, it's less than significant, therefore we don't need to do an EIR. That's an easy challenge in court. And so we felt it was appropriate to continue down the path that we started with the EIR for the regulatory ordinance that the prior board directed us to do, and use that same document that we'd already spent a lot of money and time on. And one of the alternatives in that original project was a ban. Part of the EIR process is you look at different alternatives, from doing nothing to other alternatives that could lessen the potential environmental impact. So we took the document that we were working on, it was just about done earlier this year, made sure that we had addressed all the impacts associated with both the potential regulatory ordinance as well as a ban and a different regulatory scheme that reduced the potential for cultivation in certain areas, and looked at those alternatives. And so rather than start over again and using either a different document or risking litigation that we didn't use, didn't do an EIR, that would just be the best and most time-efficient way to conclude the process by utilizing this EIR. An EIR is a lengthy process. No one likes it. Everyone, struggles with the time that it takes to get through an EIR process. But there was certainly no attempt by staff to try to delay adoption of a ban because of using the EIR. We felt that it was best to continue using the EIR and do it right the first time rather than have to go back and do it again later. So while there might have been some initial delay by continuing with the EIR process, rather than just trying to adopt a ban through a notice of exemption or a negative declaration, we felt that in the long run this was the safest and most efficient way to do it.
That leads to another question. Given the fact that a couple of counties around us have instituted ban ordinances, and they did it relatively quickly, is it not in fact that this EIR process that we're going through in part is because of the prior urgency ordinance, and there are grows here, where regulated grows here, and the other counties did not have any regulations to allow grows at any time, so that engulfed a larger aspect instead of a negative deck going towards an EIR?
Absolutely. The other counties in Amador and Columbia and to the north and south of us adopted bans fairly early on, several years ago. And at the time, they adopted those on an exemption. The situation was different in those counties. They had not had sort of the same openness towards the cultivators that were already here previous to adoption of the urgency ordinance. And so by the time that we got to the point where you wanted to adopt a ban, we had an established industry in place. Granted, the regulations are still in process, but there's easily 1,000 growers in the county. We have a regulatory program, temporary regulatory program in place and the potential for environmental impact associated with changing course, we felt, was enough to have a more serious look at the environmental effects of that.
If I could just add briefly to that, most other counties had some sort of regulations already on the books, whether it's some sort of regulatory scheme for portions of marijuana commerce and cultivation, or they had some sort of ban, and which means they would have already done CEQA analysis on whatever they had in place, whereas we just had the permissive zoning implied ban, which also adds to the fact that there had been no environmental study done at all on any programmatic zoning ordinance in our county.
Ms. Moss, ladies and gentlemen, this is Julie Moss from County Council. Ms. Moss, is there any county that has gone through this process and now is in litigation as a result of not doing any EIR?
There actually had been one. There had been a county which I think actually had a pre-existing ordinance of some sort on the books. I believe it was, I don't know if Ms. Stedfeld can help me, or was it Yolo County? One of the counties up north.
I believe it was Humboldt.
Humboldt County. And they had actually had something on the books and then went to a regulatory scheme in the wake of the new state legislation. They attempted to do it on a mitigated negative declaration instead of an EIR. They were sued and ultimately had to not only pay the attorney's fees on that attempted litigation, but they had to go back and do an EIR. And they were starting from a place that was already more developed than we did, because they already had something on the books that had gone through some sort of environmental analysis.
Okay. Thank you. Supervisor Mills?
Without delving into too much of closed session discussion, which we probably will have in the future, do you see the potential, there's flaws in our EIR? Are we going to be able to pull together one that is defensible in the final result? What I'm looking at is, I'm sure no matter what, there's going to be litigation from either side,
yeah,
so to speak.
The goal always is to prepare a defensible EIR. We'd be wasting our time and money and effort to prepare an indefensible EIR. So yes, I believe that we can, but doesn't necessarily mean that we will. It depends on the judge. It depends on the efforts of any opponents to the ultimate decision that the county makes. How much resources they want to put towards fighting the county's action.
Which could it ultimately then require us to go back and redo the EIR, or to, in other words, start that process over?
That is the usual outcome of an unsuccessful defense of an EIR. The judge would determine, where it was deficient, and then require us to go back and redo it.
Thank you, Mr. Meyer. Further comments by the board? Supervisor Tofinelli.
If this EIR is attached to any regulatory or ordinance or anything, not marijuana aside, anything that we've done in EIR and it was challenged, and we go back, what happens to what it's attached to?
Well, it depends on what the plaintiffs file. And if they ask for a stay of that, then that ordinance would be stayed. It would not go into effect.
If the judge grants it.
If the judge grants it, yes. And so there's different options. In many cases, the judge won't grant the stay. The ordinance stays into effect until the ruling is made. In other cases, if there is grounds for staying the action, then the judge would grant that, and we'd be still where we are today with the urgency ordinance and no other permanent ordinance in place.
If that is the case, how long for this particular EIR, if you had to go back to scratch, start over and go through the entire process, what length of time? I'm not trying to pin you down to exact day.
We're basically starting over again. So the analysis part would probably not be as long, but the notification periods, the comment periods, so we'd probably be talking at least 6 months, if not a year or more. And then you've got the time to, for the courts to decide, how long it gets to court and the arguments and the briefs and all that process. That can take, several years in some cases. So Licking County can get confirmation of the court process.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Comments? Counsel?
No, I was just going to clarify. If anything were to be challenged and it's caught up in the courts, litigation on CEQA cases can be drawn out, like Mr. Maurer said, for multiple years. So it's a very time-consuming process once you get to the courts. So just so the board knows, it would not be 6 months. The 6 months that Mr. Maurer was referring to would just be staff working on fixing any changes that a court could potentially at some point find was insufficient in an EIR that was conducted.
Thank you, Counsel. Further comments by the board or staff? Supervisor Stofanelli.
Not to say this is going to happen, but I want to fully explore everything that could happen here today. And I know this is emotional for both sides. We could probably draw a chalk line down the center from one side of the other here for this issue. If decided today, and you didn't give us a timeline for your addressing comments on the EIR, but I assume it's probably going to be at least a month or possibly a little bit longer. And because of the nature of the EIR, what you spoke of, that it was initially started to incorporate regulations in it. If this board gives direction to add some regulations into it, be it 600 acres or whatever type of regulation, would that delay anything with the EIR? Would it have to go out for circulations again? Would it delay anything timeline-wise for you addressing?
I don't believe so, but it really depends on what the board chooses to do. So right now we have the range of options before you of what the prior board directed us, the draft ordinance that we worked on for the prior board back in February of 2016 to a complete ban. And the process for an EIR is intended to identify ways to reduce the environmental impact of the project. And the original project was the regulatory ordinance from 2016, February 2016, not the urgency ordinance. So if we identify, and it doesn't have to be just those, the alternatives specifically identified in the EIR, but other means to reduce the environmental impact. It could be anything from parcel size to zoning to standards to other rules and regulations or fee programs that reduce those impacts. Those could be added to an ordinance, the ordinance modified to incorporate those measures, and it would be covered under the scope of the EIR. The only time you'd have to go back and recirculate it is if you identified new impacts that weren't previously discussed in the EIR, or you changed the project to the point where it made it more of an environmental impact. So really the full range of options before you.
Thank you.
Further comments? Board? Staff? Any further comments? I think we'll open to public comment. Ladies and gentlemen, you'll have 3 minutes. And keep in mind that we will be taking a break at 12 for lunch. We'll have the opportunity for everybody to speak. And we want to keep it focused on the agendized item. Thank you very much for your understanding. Ms. Ranke, good morning.
Good morning. Vicki Ranke, Angels Camp. I know I've been questioning whether or not a ban truly needs an EIR. I've sit in meetings, I've come to planning, you hear about EIRs. They're usually because you're going to do something to the environment. A ban does not do anything to the environment. It actually eliminates everything from the environment. So I looked up on the state website, and it says when and why, or wait, I'm sorry, who must comply with CEQA. CEQA applies to certain activities of state and local public agencies. A public agency must comply with CEQA when it undertakes an activity defined by CEQA as a project. A project is an activity undertaken by a public agency or a private activity which must receive some discretionary approval, meaning that the agency has the authority to deny the request permit approval from a government agency, which may cause either a direct physical change in the environment or reasonably feasible indirect change in the environment. Most proposals for physical development in California are subject to the provisions of CEQA, as are many governmental decisions which do not immediately result in physical development, such as adoption of a general or a community plan. Every development project requires the discretionary governmental approval will require at least some environmental review, unless an exemption applies. So already in the first paragraph, why do we need CEQA? There's no environmental impact. That's what this is all about. CEQA is all about the environment. So here's the other part of this. Quite frankly, as a citizen, I am very tired of hearing, oh, we can't do that because we're going to get a lawsuit. And this is one of the reasons why, personally, I'm strongly against this marijuana business, because that's who they are. They're big money, they're big lawyers, they have stopped everything in our county so far. We have tried to put this on the ballot, the people of Calaveras County. It has been stopped, and every time there is the marijuana people behind the reason it got stopped. And we're tired of it. You guys are our supervisors. Please, 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 do your job. You know what? Dennis said it earlier. They're going to sue us no matter what we do. So go for it, but CEQA, in my opinion, is not legal. We don't have to legally do a CEQA on a ban. And I don't know if it's been in court yet, but we could be the first ones to try. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Will Moore from Rancho Calaveras, and what you gentlemen are contemplating is criminalizing behavior that isn't criminal. Growing marijuana is not criminal behavior. It's agriculture. And marijuana agriculture has no more difference on the environment than growing corn or grapes or anything else. I've been to many meetings regarding this subject here and elsewhere, and what I have never heard is why. Why the ban? Mr. McManus and Mr. Tuno and Mr. Mills have never explained why. But we had a fellow here a moment ago who explained why. When I arrived here, there was a prayer session going on outside, and this minister, I guess, said, you have a mandate from heaven. The king of, creator of, and operator of the universe wants you to ban marijuana. The Christian Women's Temperance League, along with a lot of Rockefeller money, was behind the Prohibition Amendment. And that amendment to ban alcohol in their war against demon drum, their cure created a worse problem than the problem they were trying to cure. And you gentlemen are contemplating the same thing. All of these problems are problems that you're creating. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Pastor Trent Fiorino, and I was just completely misquoted. I didn't say half of, not even 90% of what he just said to you. I said that there were the people that gathered to give you the mandate. I never said anything about God. I don't know where he got that. But my question is we've got all this discussion about this environmental impact report. Marijuana was, the cultivation of the commercial cultivation was approved by the supervisors without an environmental impact report. We don't even have it yet completed, yet the growing is going on. affecting the environment. But now you're telling us that you can't vote on a ban because we need an environmental impact report to vote on a ban. That's nonsense. Why is one allowed without a ban and the other not? If you need an environmental impact report to grow pot, because that's what it originally was for, then you need to suspend the commercial cultivation in this county right now until that environmental impact report is out. Makes absolutely no sense. So to say it's not a delay tactic, it is absolutely a delay tactic. It's being used to delay it so another crop can get in, so we can push this past January when the state will then step in with state law. And those of you that are doing that are cowards. Stand up and do the job you were voted in to do. The people have spoken on numerous occasions by over 5,000 signatures to get it on a ballot, and then we get a out-of-area judge comes in and goes along with this and says, no, it can't go on the vote. That doesn't mean that the people weren't in favor of the ban. That means our voice was taken away from us. You are now our voice. We voted you in to be our voice. Speak for us. We don't work for you. You work for us. That's how it works. We voted you in. And people saying we can't have 3-2 against, that's not fair. If 3 vote in favor of ban, that's the way a represented republic works. It doesn't have to be unanimous. So we're asking you, please, stop the delay tactics. We do not need an environmental impact report to vote on a ban. We didn't need it to
30 seconds.
Allow them to grow. So let's get on with it.
Thank you.
Broadcasters in Valley Springs. To correct a couple of the previous speakers, the fact that there wasn't a vote was based on a judge seeing that the language that Mr. Tuno had written was not correct. It was suggesting to the voting public, many of whom would have no familiarity with the issue, that the Board of Supervisors had approved something and they were voting to say, yes, we go along with that. And for that reason, it was taken off. Mr. Tuno was too clever by half. Now, I understand his motivation because already signs had gone up all over the county, no 1B, support public safety. So, of course, he knew he was going to be outspent, and he knew the other side was going to try and twist things. Supervisor Tofinelli spoke very correctly when he talked about drawing a chalk line down the center. And your job is to get everybody off their side and meeting somewhere in the middle with something we can all live with. Regarding the environmental impact report, remember when Donald Rumsfeld talked about the unknowables, we know what we don't know? It's almost a fool's errand to have environmental impact on this. And I realized that when I attended the meeting on Monday night that Supervisor Mills was at, taking notes in the back. The 2 people who made the presentation, and I believe this report was prepared largely by people from outside the county who are less familiar than our own people would be. At one point, I asked, and he answered, because they put a slide up referring to water degradation, and it said there would be minimal impacts on water. I said, well, that can't be true. And when I asked, the first guy didn't want to answer. The second guy finally did. He said, for the purposes of this report, we treated it as though all growers would be in compliance. There you go. Throw the whole EIR out, because we already know that of those 1,000 growers, at least a half of them aren't legal, and they're not going to be in compliance with any ban you put in. So when you say there's going to be minimal degradation of the water supply, well, that would be true if all growers would be in compliance. But they won't be. A more minor point was that they never studied the effect of marijuana grows or a ban on people with allergies. Lord knows, we have an aging population. Plenty of them have a lot of allergies. How could you never study that? The report, though, it's really almost impossible to prepare a report when you don't really know what's going to happen. So you assume all growers will be in compliance, when we all know they won't be. I don't fault anybody. I just say it's really hard to do that, and it's a better way would be to get everyone on the same page for a third way. Thank you.
Good morning again. Bill Wilson, District 1. Alternative to ban commercial cannabis cultivations. Number 1, adhere to the voter initiative Measure C. 67% of the voters of Calaveras said yes to. Measure C, this is the simple language that was on the ballot, gentlemen. Shall the ordinance establishing a cannabis cultivation tax of $2 per square foot of licensed outdoor mixed canopy area, increasing to $45 per pound maximum, $5 per square foot of licensed indoor canopy area, increasing to $70 per pound maximum, and a gross tax of 7% on manufacturing of cultivated cannabis, and a gross tax of 7% on medical or legal cannabis storefronts and collectives for general governmental purposes to be adopted. 67% of the voters said yes. They said tax it, grow it. They didn't say ban it. There's no mandate to ban. There's 5,000 people who signed an initiative that was faultily written and therefore thrown out of court. The board should, if anything, put it on a referendum because the voters voted on it. It was tied to 1795 as written in February. Without 1795 as written in February and adopted, there's no reason for Measure C. Not a darn thing. Not one. Amend the ordinance 1795 as adopted in February 2016 to comply with all new and revised state laws. Its adoption of last February 2016. Since Calaveras County is a general law county, the board should comply with the voters' will, not personal opinions. We should comply with state law allowing outdoor growing of 6 personal plants except in sensitive areas, not force those indoors by costing our county more state tax dollars. Prop 64, Section 34019F3C. The AMA states that funds will be dispersed through the Board of State and Community Corrections for making grants to local governments to assist with law enforcement, fire protection, or other local programs addressing public health and safety associated with the implementation of the Control, Regulate, and Tax Adult Use of Marijuana Act. Those counties that do not allow outdoor, the board shall not make any grants to local governments which have banned the cultivation, including personal cultivation under Section 11362.2B3.
Sir, thank you.
Yep.
James Walker Murphys. I wanted to reiterate the people have spoken, and you got 30,000 registered voters and you got 5,000 signatures. It's not the people speaking. That's not majority. Now, 8 million people in the state of California versus the 6 million that passed 64, the recreational law, that's a pretty big majority. 2 million more people. That's like twice the population of San Francisco. Our own county would have to vote yes, everybody, 65 times to get that kind of approval, those kind of numbers. I started reading last night from 8, I was up till about 1 reading the revised 64. And I've written you guys letters and told you that thing was a hydra. It was written to adjust and to change. They watched all these counties for a year, saw what we were going to do, and they want the tax money, and they're going to continue to change that law to get it. All we're doing is hurting any kind of chance at our local economy at getting a piece in this. The new revised 64 says you guys aren't going to be stopping delivery trucks. It says a lot of things. It was a big change, and it melded the medical law with the recreational law. And it was a long read, guys, but it all pointed at one thing. We need to regulate this. We need to improve our sheriff's department. I saw that Emerald Triangle, they instantly in the budget just handed 1-point-something million to those guys to stomp out the illegal grows right off the top of the budget. These are people that are complying. These are people, and the state EIR came out, which said that as long as everybody's following these organic rules, because this is an organic law, there's not going to be the environmental impact. The last meeting I also saw our own people say, registered growers, there hasn't been a single fine levied for them breaking environmental rules. It's the illegal growers. Once again, we need to take every bit of that money. We need to make sure this guy has everything. Top of the line, everything. Cars, people, and we need to stomp out those illegal growers. It's like the Alamo here. I look at the entire west coast of the United States, recreational green. I see that Mexico's following suit, Canada's following suit, and all the way into Alaska. And here we are, this dot, like we're some kind of Alamo. And a lot of the taxpayers don't want to be part of that kind of fight. We saw what happened at the Alamo. You try to hold out against everybody. It's not going to work out good for us, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair, can I make a comment here real quick? Just for the benefit of the speakers, please don't pound on that podium. It's hard on our young lady over here in the corner and her earpiece. It just makes it difficult to get it across. Thank you. Thank you.
I promise to abide by that, Mr. Mills. My name is Mike Gonsman. I'm a 30-year resident of Calaveras County in District 1 at this time. And I started off this morning with a very well-organized list of things I wanted to talk to, but due to some intervention on the way here and some other issues that happened, I was confused at the beginning of this meeting. I even stood back in the back thinking it was time to talk and then realized that we seemed to be drifting off the agenda that we were supposed to be on. Nevertheless, you know what? Every one of us in this room that has a decision to make has more than enough information to make their decision. You either feel morally that this is a bad thing or you don't. Plain and simple. Gentlemen talked about the legal ones that were here that paid their money. Well, the problem with that is he may be right, I don't know, that those individuals have not caused environmental damage. But the problem is when you have something like growing dope or raising, making firearms for Mexico or whatever going on in your county, you're going to attract a lot of individuals that are not desirable. You will never keep those people out of this county as long as you permit an industry that is not a good industry to be here. Now, this county has faced lawsuits ever since I've been here. And they're going to continue to. But I submit to you, Board of Supervisors, right now, you have an opportunity to change the direction of this county. Now, you can do that and be noted for that in history, if you will, or you can do the opposite and also be noted in history as the one that finally put the last knife in us as far as the county, and we're just totally gone. You can save the county or you can ruin the county. It's up to you, but I do want to, the last thing I want to say is it was talked about a little bit earlier as you can see, we had a pastor here today, which I really appreciate. He talked about his area up in McCollum Hills and how they felt about this. But we have grown an alliance in this county, gentlemen. I want you to be aware of that. And it came from the band committee and other concerned citizens of this county, some 5,200. Many of those people still we talk to on a regular basis. I want you to understand, you elected officials, that we will reach every area of this county in force until we get the right people to represent us in this county. Even though I'm in District 1, I'll be in 5 and I'll be in 3 and I'll be in 4. And we will work very hard to make sure that those individuals in those counties get the proper representation in this county.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Time's up.
Joan Wilson, District 1. I can't believe we're still talking about a ban. Out of 2 districts, you want to talk about 5,000 signatures collected for a ban. measure, out of those two districts, more people voted to regulate than that signed that ban petition. And trust me, everybody had an opportunity to sign that ban petition. Not only that, but gentlemen, you have an opportunity to make history here. You can bring this county into a prosperous county. And I would like to see that concrete plant start up again, making hempcrete. Something that doesn't burn, doesn't mold. Two things we have a problem with in this county, isn't it? We can do this. You gentlemen can do this. You can educate yourselves. You can learn about all of the things that cannabis can do for us. Just because it was banned a long time ago, it was created, put onto a Schedule 1 against Mr. Nixon's people. They all told him, don't do it. He did it anyway. He made history, didn't he? What kind of history do you want to make? Do you want to bring this county into a prosperous county, collect taxes, and have regulated cannabis? Something that can bring back this county? Or do you want to send us into bankruptcy and have this county emptied of people? Have your children not be able to stay here because they can't afford to? It's up to you. The other thing is I know there was some budget ideas. I wish that whiteboard was here because I'd certainly like to see it. Okay. Still don't know how you're going to do it. I don't see a ban being afforded. The country, not just the county, the country has spent billions of dollars trying to eradicate cannabis. It hasn't been done. What makes you think that you're going to do it? It's not going to happen. The EIR, that was originally done for cannabis regulation, and to change its scope is highly irregular, and I don't think it covers really what a ban would cost and how you could do it. Anyway, avocados are being ripped off too. Thank you.
Thanks for the board's opportunity to be here. My name is Jeff Michael. I'm Executive Director of the Center for Business and Policy Research at the University of Pacific. Our center did an economic impact report on behalf of some of the folks on this side of the room a few months ago that I think all of you received. They asked us to follow up that report with some fiscal impact analysis and asked me to come today and provide that to the supervisor. So I brought some copies of the report here. And I know I just have a moment to speak to it, so I'll be brief. Just mention that our center for a decade has been doing economic and fiscal studies for local governments as well as businesses across Northern California. Cannabis has been something that we've been looking at for the past year or two, but it's a relatively small and new part of our research operation. And let me just talk a little bit about our findings based on the information instead of assumptions that we made. First of all, we assumed $2.5 million and 25 county staff on a regulatory program, just similar to what was put in place last year. We assumed that if a regulation system was in place, that by the time we got to about a year from now, fiscal year starting in 2018, and going forward, there would be about 250 licensed producers in the county based on the current approval rate and our own expectations that that number will reduce over time as Prop 64 is implemented statewide. The bottom line, we estimated a net gain between $7 and $16 million positive net to the county budget, 12 to 25% of the general fund. We didn't assume any manufacturing or Measure C revenues relative to manufacturing. What we did look at was registration fee revenues, assuming that you continued with a $5,000 annual fee, and another scenario that assumed that you increased it to match the cost of the regulatory program. We looked at the Measure C cultivation tax based on the 250 growers and some other assumptions we made, and estimated that between about $8 and $11 million a year. We looked at retail excise tax from Measure C retail sales, about $500,000 a year to the county. We looked at the local share of the state sales tax, the 1% share that you have on ordinary sales. That brought about $64,000 a year. And then we looked at Prop 64 grants to local law enforcement, but no other areas.
Sir, your time's up. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone. Prapana Randall Smith, District 3 voter. One of the things that I hear in the political discourse around all of this is that there's an assumption that Calaveras is an island unto itself. That is, it is isolated and it should make all of its rules, larger context, be damned. Well, California has legalized, and this thing is coming. It is here. We have a full legalization coming in the state of California. When the state has legalized, a local ban, in my opinion, and I have a certain track record of making certain legal calls around here, in my opinion, and I'm not a lawyer, but I believe a local ban becomes a project in the context of a larger legalized environment. If the state is legalized and you have a ban, that ban becomes a project subject to an EIR. Now, another thing I'd like to talk about is there is a new rider bill that just came out that the governor will be signing any day. It was passed by the state Senate and the Assembly. And a lot of interesting information in there. It's going to require a revision of the rules that they're working on right now. And one of the things that I looked at in my review of it was the relationship between the state and the county. Now, it's interesting that the state delegates, actually in some cases mandates, that local authorities take care of certain functions that the state wants to get done. For example, they delegate to the agricultural department or another local agency the responsibility of the track and trace system. And so the point that I'd like to make is that the county can be very much involved in the state regulations here. And the county can be on top of things. It's not going to necessarily be far-off bureaucrats imposing things, but rather people in our county, our own employees, can be involved in implementing the regulations. Now, I also want to say that the regulations mean that those who can't comply, they're going to exit and they're going to be shut down. And I can tell you, I'm looking at these regulations and I really want to get to work on them. They are scary. Even for me, I can tell you it's going to be hard work to get all the protocols, all the training, everything in place that's going to be required by the state. It's serious, serious work. And the sooner we get a regulation ordinance passed here, the sooner we can get to work on this. The sooner the Ag Department can get to work on this. The sooner we can get past, 30 seconds? Okay. So it's going to, like I said, it's going to be a major, major challenge for businesses to comply, but we're all dedicated to making it so. Those that manage it are going to be okay. Those who can't, they're going to be gone. And I'm sorry to say, I think a lot of the current growers here in this county aren't going to make it past those regulations. That'll be a reality of the regulatory process. Finally, we can't legislate morality. It's never worked. It just doesn't work. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Gina Gonzalez, District 4. I would like to say that I read the UOP study. I called UOP. I talked to them, and apparently it was paid for by large by the Ace Hardware Arnold store, and he is a grower. So that tells you where the source is coming from. If you want to do any information, you can email me. Dennis has my email, and I can give you the contact information. The facts are kind of biased as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, thank you.
Morning again, Marty Crane. There were several things that popped into my mind this morning, and one of them was, yes, our meetings do seem to be more what's the word I'm looking for? Conventional? No, they're nice. They're much nicer now. And I think that has a lot to do with who's sitting up here as well. You know, how you listen and process the information has a lot to do with how the public responds. And are you listening and processing the information from everyone? It also really bothers me when I hear as going right down that slippery slope again about separation of church and state. That frightens the hell out of me. In the very beginning of America, why were we coming here? To seek religious freedom and freedom from religion. So that bothers the heck out of me. And then it bothers me also when I hear people get up and threaten. You know, I'm a voter. Yeah, well, we all know that. We're all voters. But when someone gets up here and says, well, you know, you do what we say, you listen to us, forget all those other people, you do what we say or we're going to vote you out. Those are threats. I think that's inappropriate. And then it was also talked about the mandate and the people that signed. Yes, 5,000 signatures on a petition for the ban. Well, they never talk about how many people walked past that table and didn't want to sign it, or how many people were looking forward to voting on that, so they could vote no. You know, not everybody was. We would never know. So I think when I hear people say we were robbed of our opportunity to vote, everyone was, and I wish they had done a better job crafting that petition. I'm sure there were other things that were setting my hair on fire this morning, you know, but we're looking towards you to process all this information, create policies that are craft policies that create fair and balanced opportunities in Calaveras County for everyone. Oh, and one other thing. We used to hear all the time about property rights. You can't do that. It's property rights. Well, we don't hear that from the people that want to ban anymore because it doesn't seem to be
Excuse me, Marty.
productive.
Ladies and gentlemen, show the respect that these folks need and deserve, just like you. I'm not going to admonish you anymore. I'm sorry, Marty. Go ahead, please. Sir, if you have a point of order, I'll hear it. Until then, let the speaker speak, please.
So having been to these many, many meetings for over many, many years, we have entertained public comment. And there have been times when people got up on every single issue, every single meeting. And that doesn't happen anymore.
Thank you, Marty. Your time is done.
Grateful. Thank you.
We lost 7 sailors over there near Japan. Their ship was a quarter the size of Japan's ship. And I'm really curious about why that happened. But, you know, I got a really good imagination. And just say somebody got high or he got tired and he just didn't do his job as well as he could have if he hadn't been high previously. Would that have affected things? I believe that people that think that they can put this kind of substance into their body and not have it affect other people. Freedom is freedom, but it isn't license to do things that, or not do things that affect other people. And I believe that it is wrong to put things into your body that is going to affect other people adversely. I believe that women, in particularly, need to treat their body with care, because the next person that comes out of them is going to be reliant on what they've given them, the health from their body. And I believe that our children should be taught that what you put into your body comes out in your offspring. They deserve to have all the genes and all the health and all the genetics that are healthy, not injured. And I'm not saying that I've never eaten cheesecake. That happens to be one of my little things, but I don't do it very often. But I think that, to me, this is what it's all about. It's what responsibility do you have with your own body to your fellow citizens? Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Good morning, Michael Falvey, Mountain Ranch. That's a tough act to follow. I will say this, my father was a career Navy man, and if he would have been here and heard her suggest that the Navy sailors that were drowned in their compartments because they had no way to escape as their ship was rammed, I think all of them, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe all of them were drowned. I don't think one of them, I might be wrong, but I don't think one of them was high, and I don't think he caused that damn accident. So let's get that straight. That's rubbish. Yes, 5,000 people signed a ban petition. It was mentioned how many people walked by the petition. I would venture to guess that, let me back up a little bit. I'm not in favor of this county being overrun by any kind of industry, any kind of industry. It just so happens we're talking about the commercial marijuana industry now. I don't want this county overrun by it. I've seen it going on in my area firsthand. It's been growing for a decade. So if this ban goes through, you're throwing me under the bus. I've used that term again previously. And that's what will happen. I don't know what I'll do. I'll report to you that those gentlemen that I told you came and looked at my house before a couple meetings ago, the growers, they were representing, there was 2 of them were representing 5, and I told you they didn't care about the ban. Turns out they weren't interested in my property. Not enough room to grow. Not a large enough area for their product. So I'm just telling you, the ban isn't going to work. What I would like to see is please regulate this and please come down on the illegal grows, because as opposed to the 5,000 that signed the petition, there are tens of thousands in this county that need your protection from the illegal grows. So please keep the majority in mind when you make your decision. Thank you.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, my name is Laura Most. I've been a resident in Rancho Calaveras for 17 years. My husband and I came up here to retire. Since in 2015, I lost him because he had breathing problems. So anyway, I just wanted to let you guys know, and you know, the special plan in Rancho Calaveras calls for non-commercial. The only commercial that is allowed is that little real estate office that was originated when Rancho Calaveras was built. I don't know about some of the other districts. Maybe they have similar restrictions also, but Rancho Calaveras does have a no commercial clause in their special plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further speakers? Mr. Segala.
Al Segala. I'm representing myself, not the Taxpayer Association. There's been a study made on marijuana, and at the time, this is back in the 70s, at that time there was quite a bit of propaganda against marijuana. It scared people and gave the impression that when people smoke that substance that they will become dangerous and like they're on crack or something. The study was done by the Schaefer Commission, and I copied this from Wikipedia, and I'll share with you what it says. The Schaefer Commission, formerly known as the National Commission on Marijuana and Drug Abuse, was appointed by U.S. President Richard Nixon in the early 70s. Its chairman was former Pennsylvania Governor Raymond P. Schaefer. The commission issued a report on its findings in 1972 that called for the decriminalization of marijuana possession in the United States. The report was ignored by the White House, but is an important document against prohibition. While the Controlled Substances Act was being drafted in a House committee in 1970, Assistant Secretary of Health Roger O. Ergberg had recommended that marijuana temporarily be replaced on Schedule 1, the most restrictive category of drugs, pending the Commission's report. On March 22, 1972, the Commission's chairman, Raymond P. Schaefer, presented a report to Congress and the public entitled Marijuana, a Signal of Misunderstanding, which favored ending marijuana prohibition and adopting other methods to discourage use. The Commission's report said that while public sentiment tended to view marijuana users as dangerous, they actually found users to be more timid, drowsy, and passive. It concluded that cannabis did not cause widespread danger to society. It recommended using social measures other than criminalization to discourage use. It compared the situation of cannabis to that of alcohol. The Commission's proposed decriminalization of marijuana possession was opposed in 1974 by the recommendations of a congressional subcommittee chaired by Senator James Eastland. The Nixon administration did not implement the recommendations of the National Commission on Marijuana and Drug Abuse. However, the report was frequently been cited by individuals supporting removal of cannabis from a Schedule 1
Thank you, Mr. Segala.
of the
Time is up,
Controlled
sir.
Substance Act. Thank
Time
you.
is up. Thank you, sir.
Good morning. Jed Richardson with Mountain Ranch Realty. In the past, I presented some data to you which shows that the property values in Calaveras County have increased by 2 to 3 times that of adjoining counties, despite the fact that we have cannabis cultivation here, and it's largely banned in adjoining counties. This data was upheld by the Alpine County judge in throwing out the arguments of the ban supporters. What will hurt Calaveras County property values is unregulated cannabis cultivation, also known as a ban. Unlike registered growers, the illegal growers have no regard for responsible grading and environmental practices and who they hire. The sheriff has indicated a ban may take a number of years to enforce. Can you imagine what's going to happen in those ensuing years? You might argue that remediation can be paid for by when placing a lien on the land when the land sells. However, as a real estate professional, I can tell you that there's not a large market for land which has illegal grading and which is an environmental cleanup site. The draft EIR does not adequately address remediation and erroneously assumes cultivation will cease upon a ban. I can also tell you that there's hundreds of burned properties largely in District 2, which will soon come on the market as soon as people receive their settlement from PG&E. If you add to this thousands of properties which are currently under cultivation, which might be put on the market as a result of a ban, and we'll realize what a true real estate crisis is. What the county does need to do is put together a stakeholders group, which includes interested parties, to develop responsible regulation. We need to start this now and not wait for a ban EIR. We already have the EIR for regulation. Let's all work together and resolve this important issue on regulation so that we can move on to other important county issues. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Perlene Yoakum, and I'm in District 1. I'm also a realtor with Groupie Real Estate, and there's quite a few realtors that have made a large amount of money off of this whole marijuana issue and buying and selling of land. I sat back there. I had no intention of speaking today, but I've listened to so many people that benefit one way or the other, and I was kind of appalled by the attacking that both sides have made on each other. To attack someone's religious belief or their ethics or their morals is just uncalled for, and I'm appalled that that was allowed today. As far as the real estate market, it's been a tough one. I am involved in a deal now, and title cannot even accept money if they know that it's from cultivation. So we talked about being on an island. California is an island. We do a lot of things that's different, but federally, the money is a problem. So, I mean, that's a big question that I ask. We gather marijuana funds. State of California agrees with it, but federally we don't. So I guess my question is to you guys, how do we handle that? I mean, what's the right answer to that? Because in buying a home, it's a problem. So I would think in other areas it would be too, and it's just something that I think you should consider. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers?
Bill McManus. I think we seem to be getting lost in the swamp again. The issue can really be simplified a little bit more when we look back at law number one, which is federal law. In an industry where all the participants in that industry wake up every morning and go to sleep each night committing federal felonies each and every day, what more can we expect to come from this group or this industry? There's no respect for the law, and that trickles down. Now in the state of California, we are a de facto sanctuary state. We've thumbed our nose at the federal government. We make our own laws. The laws they're making regarding marijuana do provide for a ban, though. When you go through AB 66 or 266 and Prop 64, multiple occasions, the authority for counties to ban is plainly outlined. But now that behavior begins to trickle down even further to Calaveras County and the legislative body that controls this county, which is the Board of Supervisors. Are you willing to look past your oath of office? Are you willing to be part of the group that wakes up each morning and goes to sleep each night condoning violations of federal law? Is that okay with you? If people wanted to move here to be in a criminal or semi-criminal state, they could have just as easily gone to Detroit or Oakland or some other hellhole. People came to Calaveras County for an entirely different reason. We depend on you to protect us. We can't make the laws. You do. All we can do is make sure that you're sitting in your chairs, which we have done. When we start looking at other areas that have tried to regulate marijuana, you find that kicking the can down the road to your successors years from now is a disservice. You won't see the problems in your lifetime as a supervisor or resident of the county. Look at Colorado. Look at some of the other areas that have done it. That equation is turning itself around. They're now spending a lot more money than what they're taking in. The social costs are skyrocketing. The moral decay in those states is overwhelming. Many of the people there wish they had not done it. And many of the cities and counties in California have not done it. So, no offense, But why does the brain trust to figure all this out reside only in Calaveras County? There may be a reason why cities and counties throughout the state have said no thank you. We will ban, we will stand on the outside, we will see what turns out, how it all works, if something should work in the future. Thank you.
Time is up. Next speaker.
Morning, Board. Steve Amaranth, District 2. Wanted to put something into reframe the conversation. Really, cannabis hemp has not been discussed much as far as an agricultural product, and the hemp version, the commercial industrial version, has not been discussed and been part of the conversation. I stand here for the plant as one of the greatest botanical gifts our Creator has bestowed upon this planet.
Sir, I'm going to have you request to speak in the microphone, please.
Yes.
Thank you.
I'm here standing up for cannabis hemp as the greatest botanical gift here on the planet. And we've been conned for over 80 years. And basically, when you go back to the federal position in Schedule 1, and it's stating here, if I may read it, I pulled this right off the DEA page. Schedule 1 drugs, substances, or chemicals are defined as drugs with no currently accepted medical use and high potential for abuse. Schedule 1 drugs are the most dangerous drugs of all the drugs scheduled with potentially severe psychological or physical dependence. Some examples of Schedule 1 drugs are heroin, lysergic acid dithalamine, LSD, marijuana, cannabis, ecstasy, peyote. Now you go and pull off from the United States patent of 6,630,507B1 is your patent number. Date of patent, October 7, 2003. United States patent, cannabinoids as antioxidants and neuroprotectants. The assignee is the United States of America as represented by the Department of Health and Human Services. This patent was first applied for April 21st, 1999, reviewed February 2nd, 2001, and then issued, as I had mentioned, October 7th, 2003. So we in this country have been conned about this plant. And I'm asking that we would open our minds and our hearts and begin to see where we've been misled. There is no way you can have good laws that are based on lies. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cliff Edson, District 1. So we have a country that makes laws all the time. How many laws are made every single year in every state? So sometimes laws need to change. They don't work. Measure B was thrown out by a judge for misleading the public, lies, and still carrying on like what the courts say don't matter. By the way, how much did Measure B cost the taxpayers of Calaveras County? $50,000, $100,000 bucks. How many jobs is that for that we could put the sheriff to work, and sheriffs to work, and deputy sheriffs? And a question for Peter. Is it true that when we do a land use ordinance that you must have an EAR? He can answer it after I'm finished.
Not now. There's 3 minutes, and then, Mr. Maurer, you can address that on staff time. Thank you, sir.
Water was my concern when I was a part of the urgency ordinance. We were getting influxed by a ton of folks because of the Butte fire and the cheap and easy land, which all had wells, septics, and everything else that's desirable. So we had to stop it. So we did the urgency ordinance to stop the influx, to get some controls over what was happening to our environment, what was happening to the neighbors. Was it perfect? No, but it can be worked with. Industry, we got an industry to pay for that's decriminalizing in the state of California, And we got that industry that has been illegal and growing here for 100 years. I mean, you could look at the history in San Andreas, and you can see that they were selling marijuana on the streets of San Andreas 100 years ago. 100 years it's been growing here. It's been illegal, and we found a way to get these folks to pay for their own industry, to straighten it up, to make it legal, to make it safe for our county. Environmentally, too. And you've seen some of the pictures that the sheriff had with all the furadan and all the chemicals that were going into the water table. I actually think it's a shame that we couldn't hear more from the gentleman from UOP, because those are real facts. Those are real facts. UOP is the institute that's fully respected by every other institute. They have standards to follow, and like it or not, what they come out with is true. They're not going to sacrifice their reputation just because one group or another comes to them and hires them to do a study. So I would like to hear from the gentleman from UOP. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Any other public comment speakers? Seeing none. Whoops, we have one more. Two more.
Trevor Whitkey, Calaveras Cannabis Alliance, District 2. Thank you, Board. I have a paper here, Cannabis Agriculture in California, the Environmental Consequences of Prohibition. It was written by Anthony Silvaggio. This paper outlines and specifies the environmental impacts of unregulated cannabis cultivation, and specifically speaks to the increased environmental impacts under an unregulated cultivation context. Essentially, if you have unregulated cultivation, what you're going to see is you're going to have massive environmental impacts. All of it is going to be done with complete disregard for best practices. The sheriff's office found carbofuran or furadan on an illegal grow site, I believe in the Burson area. Carbofuradan is an illegal pesticide. It would be no different than using DDT. It is something that you can only get from outside of the state or the country. It was brought in from Mexico, presumably. These are the kind of toxins that we're going to see all over our county if we go forward with a ban. Additionally, the dumping, the sewage at the other site that the sheriffs cleaned up and showed in their study session several weeks ago indicate the magnitude of the environmental impacts of unregulated cultivation. There is no plan or possibility of solving these issues without registered cultivation. Currently, there are 1,500 grows in the county. Of these, it's estimated, going off of the urgency ordinance compliance rate, that 280 of these are compliant. Of these 280 farms, the county is going to be able to raise about $8 to $17 million in tax revenues and $1.4 million in fees. These are the people who are compliant. These are the people who are passing through the urgency ordinance process. The revenues that are going to be generated off of these compliant farms are the only way that we're going to get a handle on the additional 1,300 farms that are out there all over the county bringing in illegal pesticides from other countries that are running into our water streams and impacting our neighborhoods. The only way that we can address this issue is through regulations. Last week we saw the budget hearing. There's a structural deficit of $6.6 million. In addition to this,
30 seconds.
There is a lot of long-term liability coming down the pike between the CalPERS unfunded pension liability that's set to double in 5 years, the property value assessments that have continued to decline from 2008, as well as the decline that happened as a result of the fire. We have structural problems that have to get addressed, and the only new revenue that we have to address any of these issues is coming through cannabis regulations. There are 280 farms that want to work.
Thank you, sir.
Mark Bolger, Mountain Ranch, Rimrock Farms. I'll keep this brief. I submitted a packet that I put together in my comments on the EIR. I won't waste your time reiterating that. It's there for your reading pleasure. I just wanted to make a comment that kind of parlays into a question for Mr. Maurer. It seems to me that there's no feasible way where we're going to see an uptick in environmental degradation or further expansion of this industry here. We're already seeing a pretty steep denial rate with regulations at the state level and the county level, administrative costs, market pressures that, no one can predict around the corner. We're going to see a shrinking of this industry. My question is there any possible way where the EIR has not covered from A to Z what this could be at its largest? I mean, it seems to me that the draft permanent ordinance from February was very permissive in the amount of cultivation and zoning that it allowed. It seems that if we are to reach a compromise, of which I think both the industry and community members have brought forth lots of good ideas, many of which I read in the comments on the EIR, it seems as though we're going to see less of an impact and not any further expansion. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Any further speakers on the public comment on the agenda item?
My name is John Erdl from District 1. I have no prepared statement at this time other than just being a citizen who wants to contribute the fact that we need to pass regulations. You've heard both sides make cases for themselves as to what you think you ought to do, and I think we have plenty of information. I think you should know by now what you want to do. I think we know what we need to do for the county's budget if we want to be fiscally responsible, because you know what the future is going to hold if we don't come up with something. It doesn't have to be cannabis, but there's just nothing else besides cannabis right now. So I just urge the board to consider the future of the county on both sides and think about what's going to happen based on our choices today and in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ben Stopper, District 5. Many points have been brought up today. My understanding why the EIR was not done prior to the first ordinance is passed as an urgency ordinance. So it's a 4 vote that was able to push through. It was an urgent matter trying to address the land rush that was happening after the Butte fire and moving forward trying to bring that amount of people down. I don't know how many people that really stopped. I've seen a list of new properties bought from August of 2016 through February 2017. I go down that list and I drive around the county quite frequently, and you drive down Jesus Maria, there's fences up that weren't there last year. I mean, they think they're going to hide behind the fence. I mean, these are illegal grows. These aren't people that are trying to comply. They bought property and they thought they were free to go in Calaveras. I originally came forward last year with the thought that we need to put through a ban to start with. That was my personal opinion. Not so much that I was against regulation and how moving forward that these people could comply, but I didn't really have the confidence in Calaveras to be able to bring together the first running laws for the state to be able to make this all work. Sitting down, talking with people, understanding the urgency ordinance afterwards, and it being a fluid document in the sense that at some point we have to establish a permanent ordinance. Going on, I was against Measure B, or D, the cannabis initiative that was on the ballot last year, because it didn't even address the issues that the urgency ordinance already addressed. We have been locked into something with a voter approval that we couldn't elaborate on to mitigate the problems moving forward. I've read through many of the EIR documents, a lot of them. I knew a lot what the comments were going to be. So I addressed alternative, one of the alternatives in my document. I don't want to double up on a lot of comment that was already being addressed. CCWD did address some of it and some of the shortcomings of the EIR with their comments. It also says in there that there's actually conflicts in comments inside the EIR where it says a smaller parcel grow would actually have more impact than a larger grow on water. Thank you, sir.
Any further public comment? Okay. Would you like to comment, sir?
I was just sitting here listening to kind of both sides here. Remind me of a situation recently where my son came to me, he's in high school, and said, I have a problem. I have 3 girlfriends, and I can't keep up with all of them. And after talking with him, I realized that, boy, what a horrible problem to have. And when I'm hearing people speak here, in the cannabis world right now, Calaveras is on the map. The growers here have produced some amazing products, which right now you guys are Roderick Emerald Triangle. The Los Angeles market alone is bigger than the entire Colorado market. There's going to be a shortage of suppliers. When I hear the people that are on so-called this side, I understand what they're saying too. And really both sides are saying the same thing. We want the illegal grows out. If you took everything that you said in this meeting and replaced it with the word guns instead of cannabis, how would you feel about it then? What if the federal government was banning you to have guns? What if somebody else wanted you to, locally, wanted to ban guns? You would have a different feeling from it. I think both sides are realistically saying the same thing. When I drive through the streets of Calaveras County, I see your empty storefronts, I see lack of commerce. There's not a lot here for younger generations as far as jobs or having the ability to stay here. If you Googled right now what a lot of grape growers are doing in Central Valley, they're actually pulling out their grapes and replacing it with cannabis because they know the market's going to be that big. You guys have such a jump start on this from work that you did earlier. An absolute ban is not the answer. Now, I agree with all the people on this side. Are there some things going on that I wouldn't want in my backyard, or I wouldn't want my kids exposed to, or I wouldn't want certain elements of people outside this county coming in? 100% agree with you. But I also think these people are providing a commerce and providing a path to help the county out tax-wise that you absolutely can't deny. So is an absolute ban the way to go? No. Both sides are actually saying the same thing. A little bit better regulation so that it's done in a way that positions you to be the forefront of California law. That's all.
Thank you, sir.
Vivian Satiu, District 1. During the budget hearings last week, the Auditor Controller brought up grave concerns regarding the MCCRP fund and shifted responsibility to different department heads, the CAO, and the Board of Supervisors. Gentlemen, are we just now finding out that our county's finances are out of control? As the control gatekeeper, the Auditor Controller knew about the misuse and misappropriation of cannabis funds since last budget year, and also said the county has overspent and misspent the funds, thus creating a $1.4 million hole in the general fund. How are we just now finding out about this? The Auditor Controller clearly stated the problem that is thematically affecting the county as a whole and said, I'm not entirely confident that 1617, what was approved by the board, is not necessarily what was drawn down on. Seriously. Like the rest of the county budget, one central budget, budget by fund, by function, and by activity. Who would ask for that? Actually, the state of California. With all due respect, gentlemen, each of you have the opportunity to do the right thing and support Supervisor Garamendi's proposal of hiring a cannabis cultivation coordinator. If the rest of the board had only listened to Supervisor Garamendi's ideas, we may have already put in place a program manager to implement some form of control and governance over the cannabis program and budget, and at least rectify the issue moving forward. There never was, and there still is, no program management and no overarching cannabis budget control to this very day. At this point in time, the cannabis fund has almost certainly been overspent. Should abatements continue, especially under a ban, money will have to come from the general fund and will generate a deeper deficit for the county. This proves the county has absolutely no money to fund a ban, let alone afford the paper the ban ordinance is written upon. A ban will certainly teeter the county closer towards bankruptcy. With proposed 12% cuts across the board, multiple layoffs, hiring freezes, and underfunding departments to the point of non-existence, you simply do not conduct these sort of extreme measures of austerity unless you are trying to avoid solvency issues. Should we also now be concerned about other county funds and be reviewing them for misuse and misappropriation as well? How about commingling of funds? Maybe it's time to call for a full state audit. Based on the county's own numbers and information, if you proceed with your ban agenda, bankrupting the county will be your legacy, gentlemen. It is really that simple. There are no amount of corporate budgeting tools and techniques that will magically save the county. The root cause of the issue appears to stem from years of creative accounting and fund mismanagement practices. Regulate it, tax it, and generate the revenues that our county desperately needs in order to sort out this devastating financial predicament. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Any further? No further comment?
I moved because I didn't know I was sitting on the wrong side of the room.
That's quite all right, sir. You can sit anywhere you want. Not a problem. Not a problem. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to bring it back to the board for discussion now, seeing there's no further public speakers. Who would like to speak first? How about if we designate Mr. Maurer to answer any question that was brought up during public comments?
Well, there's one specific question that was asked by Mr. Edson, whether or not every land use ordinance requires an EIR. The answer to that is not specifically an EIR, but every land use ordinance is subject to CEQA, which could require an EIR. A negative declaration, in some cases maybe. It is on. I'm trying to be closer to it. So, not specifically an EIR, but it is subject to CEQA, is the answer. I think some of the other questions that were asked were more rhetorical, so unless you have any specific questions for me, I have nothing else to say.
Okay. Mr. Maurer, I seem to recall Mr. Edson asked how much the election cost. Was that a question that you recall?
That's not a question I'd be able to respond to.
Make sure I'm correct, and did he ask that question?
He did.
Okay, could you answer that?
I would have to
Turner?
verify numbers, but it was roughly 40,000 for the ballots themselves.
Okay, those ballots were incorrect or not used as far as that issue, right?
Right, we were
Okay.
required to print the ballots, but they were not used.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Okay. I'll bring you back to the board. Anybody would like to speak first? Supervisor Plow.
How much does Major D cost the county?
I do not have the numbers strictly in front of me, but any countywide election is roughly, at a minimum, $80,000, so.
Okay. Supervisor Garamendi.
If I might, Madam Clerk, that was a general election, so we were having an election. So it was $80,000 to run the election with all the people on the ballot, and it wasn't $80,000 for that one measure.
If there was singularly one measure on the ballot, it would be at a minimum of $80,000. Since there were other items on the ballot, I still would have to go look at the numbers for the election themselves, but the total election cost was probably closer to $150,000.
Right, but it wasn't $80,000 for D. It was $80,000 for the election, plus $150,000. It sounded like you were saying it cost $80,000 for that one item, and I'm saying there were a lot of items on that same ballot.
There were several items on that same ballot. The issues we had with the general election, with it being more expensive in general, was that we had to go to two-card ballot, but that was primarily because of statewide, and that is why our election costs were higher than normal. So you could state that adding an additional measure added to that potentially as well, because in some cases we could have just had one ballot card. So.
Further comments by the board? Further comments by staff? Supervisor Tofinelli, I see your light, sir.
Yeah, my light's on. I guess I'll start the conversation. We've got about 10 minutes before we go to lunch. I want to get back to the EIR and some of the comments that were made regarding not needing an EIR, even when Mr. Maurer had given some explanation. Last Tuesday we were here and we were going through our budget, and the district attorney was at the podium speaking on behalf of her budget. And there was a discussion at that time about the discovery of 28 cases of illegal grading and tree harvesting at these groves. 25 of those were at registered groves. They were out for inspection. 25 of those were of registered groves. So the idea of not needing an IR, or even the side that says we're registered, we came forward, does not exclude illegal activities going forward. In my mind, they were illegal, regardless whether they registered to have a grow or not. What they did in their activities was illegal, and they got caught for it. And that has to be restored. That is part of an EIR process as we go forward. You have to understand that there are grows going out there, whether they're registered or they've received a permit or they're illegal. The environment has been changed for most of those grows. Whether there was grading done, whether there was trees harvested, what have you, the environment has been affected, and the EIR is there to address that. It's not like we were starting from scratch. And I thought it was very interesting of the 28 that's been identified before, and Supervisor Garamendi had brought up the fact that there are a bunch of illegal grows that have done the same thing that so far has escaped detection, or maybe not detection, but haven't been approached by CAL FIRE yet, or even the district attorney. So there's a lot of them out there. There's a lot of things that are happening, and most of it is in District 2. I have a map in front of me of the locations of the people that registered to grow, and extensively they are in District 2, extensively. But there was a lot of environmental impacts that were done in order for them to go forward with their grows that have to be addressed. And it's very important, in my opinion, that we go down the EIR path. And I was in favor of it. I voted for it because we need to address that. We definitely need to address, when I'm looking at this map and the locations of all of these groves, there is significant impacts to our environment that need to be addressed. And the other things on the illegals or even the registers grows, we don't know what other impact. Those were just tree harvesting. Those were just grading impacts. There could be and probably are other impacts. I've heard from lots of people about water issues that they no longer had, how to address the water issues. All of that situation has to be addressed in an EIR. That's the state law. I mean, you may not like it. Not all of us like it. I was not in favor of it, but it is the law. And as a subsidiary of the state of California, the county, we need to follow state laws. And that is exactly what this board has chosen to do going down that path. I want to talk a little bit about some of the conversations that I've had over the last couple weeks, and even prior to that. As I sit here in this room today, during all the comments or even the other item that was on the agenda was being discussed, a lot of people were staring at me. A lot of people think I'm a swing vote in this situation. They look at me as a swing vote. It's up to him. There's two on one side, two on the other, and Toppinelli is going to be the decision here. That's not the case. I don't look at it that way. It's not a case of a swing vote here. It's not a case of being threatened. Again, I've made this statement as I've said here, and I've listened to people comment. And and I want to comment to the general portion over the last couple weeks of the public comments. Thank you for not coming forward as we were having done prior. to me speaking up a couple weeks ago, people continuously threatening this board and making accusations. I want to thank you for holding that in. I understand it's a very volatile situation. You're talking about people's incomes here. You're talking about people that view it the way they view it as it's illegal and it's not any good, and it brings in, and it does bring in, regardless of what one side says to the other, there are undesirables. There's a lot of increase in crime that happens, that comes forward here, as we've seen over the course of the last year or so. I said before, if you threaten me, I'm an iron worker by trade, 45 years of an iron worker, and I've heard threats, and threats don't mean anything to me. You can threaten me till the cows come home. It's not going to affect how I think it should be or what my opinion is, and I've not wavered from my opinion from the beginning of my onset of my campaign and to this point, to this day. And Mr. McManus, I met with you and Mr. Tuno, and I told you both at that time that it doesn't belong in residential. I specifically made that comment to you. It was on my Facebook page. It was on my website pages. And I sit here today in this chair and say the same thing, and I've said it over and over and over and over and over. This stuff does not belong in any residential areas. Now, how are we going to get to that today? If we do, I don't know, but I will not be a swing vote in favor of anything that goes forward on any regulations if it's discussed by this board. I voted one way to begin with. I would like to see this board at least have discussions on it, but I will not be a swing vote one way or another. I was part of the three that voted to go towards this ban where we are today and sit here today. I asked for the other side, because I've heard one side come forward, and they did give us and handed us many times their opinions on the ordinance when it came out and what they would like to see, and I had asked the other side to come forward with theirs, and they did, and I appreciate everything. I've read them all. There's a lot of information that I had to go through to get to this point, and you know, again, I will say to the people that are all out here, sitting here, and people that are listening in, and the people that will be watching this or are watching the live stream right now, and I've said it before, we are here to represent everybody. This is America. The people have fought for our rights. People have died for our rights. I see a gentleman right here with a Vietnam hat on. He was obviously in the service. They fought for our rights to speak right here at this podium and say what we have to feel without the threat of somebody else not liking them or trying to threaten them or whatever. This is our rights. This is America. This is not a third world country where you're afraid to speak up for your rights or even to speak up for your opinion. And I am very interested in hearing all the opinions from both sides of an issue. That is our job. That is what we were elected to do, to hear both sides and go down the path that we feel is the right path for the county, not only now but in the future. And I appreciate everybody that came up and spoken. I appreciate everybody that took their part to address the EIR and put their comments, not only to the board and all the emails that we all have received, and standing up here and giving their comments and handing papers and documents over there with their thoughts to the clerk to be distributed among us. Again, there are many, many people throughout the history of our country that fought for you to be able to do that. And I will not hear arguments one way or another from anybody that does not allow people to do that. In my mind, it shuts down my thoughts on them. You need, and I thank the chair for speaking up when people are saying something they didn't like somebody had to say at the podium. They sat there, most people sat there quiet when you did your presentation and you said what you had to say, what you felt right here when you went up and speak. They have the same right. And they have the right to have the respect. This is America again. Many wars were fought for it. I will say, I understand that there's a lot of frustrations. This is a very volatile situation here in the county, or a topic. It seems, again, that it, in my opinion, it probably will not end with whatever happens here today. It will not end whatever happens as we go forward. I think one side or the other, if they don't get exactly what they want, we'll have a problem with whatever's transpired here today. But again, I want to say that I have never wavered from my point, and I believe it does not belong in any designated zones that have residential applied to them. That's my opinion.
Thank you, Supervisor Tofinelli. Supervisor Mills, you had the line on.
Yeah, I was just going to briefly, because I know we're going to go to lunch. Please understand with budgets and budget processes under GFOA or GAP, and again, I know the CEO is familiar with both, we cannot include funding unknowns in a budget process. And that doesn't just include Measure C money. That includes SB1 or any other funding mechanism. To make assumptions that you're going to receive X amount of dollars and start build that in your budget, that creates a lot of anomalies. And so I just want it clearly understood. This budget that we have in front of us is not built on any Measure C money, because we don't know how much it's really going to be. Thank you.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, obviously there's a lot more discussion to be held by the board and staff. We're going to be going to lunch right now. We'll return at 1:30. And there we go. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We'll get back to our agenda item, and we're in board discussion now. We've heard from Supervisor Tofinelli, heard from Supervisor Mills. Any other comments by board members? Whoops. No board member comments.
I'll defer for
Okay. Well, I have some comments. Ladies and gentlemen, I've sat on this board for 3 years, and I've had the unique experience to go through all the crises in those 3 years. I've spent time as a patrol deputy and as a deputy in this county, and I got to feel the pulse of the people in this county. But recently I've seen a big wedge drove right through the middle of this county. I've seen people that are friends run to the opposite sides of an issue to the point where they're not even speaking to each other anymore. And that is very serious to me. We have a good county. We've done more than our share of giving, and suffering. And now we have this issue ahead of us, along with others. And if we don't do something about this and put an end to this and go on with our lives, we will be lost. And we can't recover from that. A lot of folks have said some comments about the board members and other people, and I would hope they're not that's not what they really feel, but I have to pay attention to that. This issue has been so convoluted on both sides
that I don't think we have the opportunity to really see or even educate ourselves to a solution for this problem. The responsibility of your elected officials up here are to make that decision for you. I disagree with that. My original position has not changed regarding marijuana, but I don't consider that now. As your elected official, that doesn't matter for me. The voice of the people in this county needs to be heard on all sides of this issue. And my position, as I stated 2 meetings ago, which I will tell you right now, is let the people decide. Now, I don't know where my other board members are on this issue. I have not discussed it with them. But we need to end this. We need to go on with our lives, be it whatever it may be, ban, regulation, but we have to put an end to this madness. But we have to be considerate of the other person's position. This is not a sandlot baseball game where you pick and choose sides. The decisions made here are going to affect our lives for a long, long time. It's going to affect our county. And we better think about surviving. And that's exactly what it is. Surviving. They have thrown everything they possibly can at us. We've had the Butte fire. We lost our sheriff in office. We have tree mortality. We have the marijuana issue. And believe me, people are out there looking to see what Calaveras County does. So we need to be very wise in our decisions. And I'm not talking about us 5 folks. The people of Calaveras County need to chime in and vote individually and determine what's going to happen to us. Now, that's my position. I would encourage other board members to state theirs if they haven't already. But that's where I'm at. I know we're not going to make everybody happy. And I know there's been threats, there have been statements, recall, whatever. If it is, so be it. If you think that the people of this county are going to cure this problem by removing your representatives, then let's give you the opportunity to vote that way. But let's not forget what we do here. Let's not forget who we are. Let's not forget we are Calaveras County. I dedicated my life to this county. I've been on that street. I've been involved in law enforcement. I spent 30 years enforcing the law. Now I'm part of that lawmaking process. And boy, I don't want to make a bad law. Because we got good laws and we got bad laws. But which way we go, it has to be the voice of the people. All the people. Not just a few, not one group, but decide where we're going to go on this path, on this journey. That's all I have to say. Thank you. Any further comments?
I certainly appreciate our chair's passion for the situation. Mr. Maurer, I've read all the comments. It's a long read. But I don't have to, all I get to do is read them. You have to respond to them. I'm sorry. It's the best I can say. That was hours and hours. I'd like to go back to the budget under environmental health, line 4130, permits and grading. In the budget, we received $1,989 in fees during the 2015 budget year, $450 in fees during the 2016 budget year, and anticipating $1,500 in fees this year for grading permits. In line item 4216 penalties, others, we find 1,780 collected in 2015. Zero is so far collected this year, and not expecting to collect any penalties for grading next year. Considering the level of environmental damage from lot clearing, this is something that Supervisor Tofinelli alluded to, earth moving, trees removed, it can be easily seen from the air. These numbers only make sense if we have a large group of residents that just do not comply and have no intention of complying. This speaks to what is our standard operating procedure if you're caught. Well, our current response is to give us an as-built and pull a permit no matter what the damage has been done to the local environment, to the native creeks and streams, to water sources for communities, for animal habitat. Keep in mind, moving substantial quantities of soil is a permanent scarring of the land. I know if this was any other issue, the environmentalists would be all over it, because this does not seem to include them for some reason. If you were in mining or any other type of business, you would end up going through CEQA, NEPA, endangered species, cultural reviews, all of that on your own. If we had done that with each individual who was grading, I'm not certain we'd be in this situation today. Our grading code should be looked at, and they should have been looked at a long time ago, just like we talked about Section 806 in the nuisance codes and revising those. Well, the grading codes probably will need to be revised as well. But over and over, the issue of full cost recovery has been part of my mantra on the budget, if you've been listening. And thanks, Brian Banner, for stating the problem in your department goes back over 10 years. When people choose to violate laws and rules, there are often severe penalties, and we should make those so that noncompliance is prohibitive. It seems like except when it comes to this. And why? Asking the state to help us with this damage is yet to be proven that they have the capacity or the willingness to help us. So from this point, just on this one issue, many have decided to simply carry on until they're caught or forced to comply, knowing we've operated this way in the past. So no matter what happens, the cost to enforce any rules currently in place is not being recovered because what happens is it's placing the burden on our taxpayers. Let's look at our ability to fully understand the costs involved in regulating. Referencing the budget hearings, tape number 2, June 14th of that meeting, beginning at 2 hours, 20 minutes, 52 seconds in. There was a discussion with an auditor on what financial tracking was done, speaking about departments. They wanted to maintain control in their respective budgets and did not want to give up that control, whether to administration or my office or anyone else. That's Rebecca Callan speaking. So the whole idea of maintaining one central budget for cannabis kind of flew out the window because you have to give up a control, expenditure control, and we don't have a budget for cannabis. And I know just recently that's been fixed, and I thank our CAO for stepping up and taking care of that. But let's continue down this track of understanding budgets, budget performance, and budget control, which is one of a supervisor's 2 primary responsibilities. In the Calaveras County Grand Jury report from last year in finding number 8, it states the Board of Supervisors and department heads lack expertise in the budget process. The county's response was only to disagree in part with finding number 8, admitting new board members and department heads initially lack expertise with the budget process, and further stating they are given a binder that includes the information on the county's budget process. But please keep in mind that there were no new supervisors to the budget process last year. Let's look at this from a process standpoint to clearly demonstrate what our capability to perform under the existing UO has been. Several department heads have been very firm in their understanding and applications of rules surrounding the UO. Where we got into problems is some of the executive decisions where we didn't come back to the board for clarification or confirmation. So on a positive note, the appeals process, the rules stated in the UO are generally followed to the letter. I think for a moment, and somebody had mentioned about the $100 appeal fee. I think we raised that in, February 2016 to $500? And if you realize that we are now over 100 appeals, roughly,
That number sounds pretty close.
pretty close. So each appeal, though, has to be prepared to an evidentiary standard, as these cases may and have ended up in court. The cost for those cases has far exceeded the appeal fee, and again is being borne directly by our taxpayers. This is planning commission, board of supervisors, environmental health, building, sheriff, legal, and others, where expenses incurred to bring people into compliance is not borne by the offender. It is being paid for by our taxpayers. The result is reduced capacity to serve those taxpayers in other ways, and also results in reduced response to other concerns. And we have no idea what those true costs were, as noted by our auditor. So I'm not saying that is one of the answers, but it just speaks to the larger problem of just exactly what level of control can we have in a regulatory process, because at this point, we seem to be having trouble controlling under the UO. And so I think if the board's going to discuss any kind of regulation and have any cognitive discussion about it, we first of all have to look at our history and our ability and capacity to handle any type of regulation, who would be paying for that regulation, and to what level we would want to do that. And at this point, you know, we've had, roughly a year to prove whether or not we could do it. I don't see that we've proven it. And so that's one of the reasons I'm standing firm right now that if we make a statement, let's just stop everything right now. If this board in the future wants to look at some other way of resolving this, fine. But until, and I understand Supervisor Calaveras' point about taking this to the ballot, until such time as we have something that is codified, it would be very difficult to do that. So I think we need to move quickly along that road towards codification if we're going to actually bring it to a ballot at a reasonable time. And I will just hold at that point for now.
Supervisor Mills? Further comments by the board? Staff? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Supervisor.
Real quick, Dennis, what do you mean by codification exactly?
Well, that the board actually makes a vote as to what they want. And whatever that statement is, if there's a decision at that point and 3 supervisors can agree to allow whatever that is to go to the ballot, but to just simply say, we're going to embark now on a track of, say, a dual effort here to put a regulate type of ordinance together on top of a ban ordinance and something down that road, I'd have to poll the board as to whether or not they'd even want to track in that direction. I think first thing we need to do is we've got the staff working towards a ban, and that is the direction that they've been instructed to go. And until we complete that, everything else should basically be set aside.
If this board decides to go to a ballot issue, a model that we could follow, if you will, is to complete a ban ordinance ballot issue, then work on a well-regulated, strict regulation, and put that before the people to vote. The question would be, is there sufficient time to do this for the November ballot?
In order to get a ballot measure on the November, everything would have to be approved by the board by August 1st. So then I think it puts on county council for time.
As the board's aware, when you put an item on a ballot, you have to do an introduction first and then bring it back for adoption and direct staff to place it on, call the election and place the initiative on the ballot. So that's a 2-step process. So if we're looking at an August 1 deadline, we would have to be adopting it at a meeting before August 1st and then introducing it at a meeting before that. That is a very, quite frankly, unrealistic amount of time to draft 2 ordinances, if that's what I'm hearing. unless it's just the ban initiative, we could certainly do that. If it is to do both, I don't think that's realistic, but if the direction of this board is to bring the draft ban ordinance that's already been drafted forward as an initiative rather than an ordinance that this board just adopts on its own legislative authority, I believe that we would be able to meet those deadlines for placing it on the ballot. Because it is a county-sponsored initiative and not a voter-sponsored initiative, it is still subject to CEQA. So we would still have to go through the process of completing and certifying the EIR, and I don't believe that we would be able to respond and bring the EIR forward for certification within those timeframes.
And further, I think that before we even discuss regulation, we need to know whether or not there's sufficient support on the board to do that, or whether we stay within the framework that was discussed on January 31st.
Supervisor Garamendi, your light's on. You wish to speak?
Yeah, I was, well, my position's been taken out multiple times, so I won't drag everybody through that, but I think this is probably correct. We should probably find out where things are. But as far as the election, I think that we've learned a lot over the last year. I mean, we are almost a full year ahead of most other counties in the state as far as learning what works and what doesn't work. You know, we were the trial balloon, and we've learned a lot. You know, things like, you know, appropriate parcel size, zoning requirements, all these things. And so I'm very concerned about an election that would bind us into a certain regulatory framework, because if we'd gone with D, or we made a permanent ordinance back in May, we wouldn't be able to make adjustments to make it work like we are now. What is voted on is what we've got until the next election. And so I want to, if we head towards regulation, I'd want the ability to adjust with as we learn. This is a new industry. This is coming into regulation. We have to have some flexibility. But we could do something like in June. I imagine the counselor is correct that this would be too short a time. But we could always do an advisory. Government code allows us to do advisory elections. It says, you know, do you like what we're doing or you're not like what we're doing? It's a much more complicated statement than that. But it allows us to find out, well, do people agree with where we've gone, if we've gone with regulation, or do they not? I also have grave concerns about the costs. I think we just spent 3 days last week clearly diagnosing that we don't have any money. And I'd be really hesitant to spend $50,000 to $80,000 on another election at this point. So, you know, we can do it, but maybe not in November would be my position.
Mr. Mauer. How would you frame an advisory ballot issue, or can we? Council, you may want to chime in on this. And number two, if the board elects to consider a dual ballot issue, a ban issue and a regulation issue, can that be done by August 1st? I heard council state that it's going to be very, very difficult.
I would agree with council that we probably could not meet the time frame to actually have something adopted and then set before the voters, because we still have to go through the planning commission first before the board can make a formal adoption of the zoning ordinance. So that, at this point in time, given the comment, you know, response to comments and then public hearing process and completion of the findings necessary to take whatever action you decide to take, I just don't see it happening by August 1st. An advisory vote, and we need to work very closely with both the elections official and county council to make sure that it meets all of the requirements of advisory vote, possibly could be, you know, prepared in time to put something on a November ballot. Now, there isn't, if I may ask Rebecca a question, is there already a election scheduled for November? So it would be a special election. This would probably be the only thing on it. So we would be bearing the full cost of that for this one item. But it may be money well spent to resolve this issue, do the voters support a ban or do they support regulation? I think you could craft it in a way that would get the answer that you need to get. I'm not sure exactly what that language would be. I would want to try to come up with something off the cuff right now, but I think that you could probably create an advisory measure that would provide you with the reading of what the public wants for that. Well, I don't think we could have something that prepared in time to actually vote on specific language of an ordinance, let alone two.
Thank you, sir. Let's talk about a single band initiative, a band ballot. If we place that on an election, if that passes by the vote of the people, how would that affect our operation here? We would lose, depending on how the ballot is written. I understand that. Would we lose all cultivation? Would we lose our collectives? Would we lose any taxes, Measure C? What's the ramifications of that?
Well, it's going to depend on how it's written.
I understand.
And currently, if I remember the details of the present ban ordinance, it would go into effect 30 days after it's voted on by the board, or if it's set for referendum or the board places on the ballot, then upon completion of the vote. The way the urgency ordinance was written, that anyone operating under that ordinance would have 90 days after the effective date to comply. And we have remediation requirements that require those who are, once it's banned, that they have to remediate the property, make sure there's no erosion issues. It doesn't mean restore it to its natural pre-cultivation condition. If grading had occurred, it's not going to go back and regrade it to go back to the original contours, but it would have to be revegetated, have to make sure there's no erosion, that any kind of structures or improvements or what's the opposite of improvements? Some of the other garbage that we see out there is cleaned up, that it's left in a position, much like we have for reclamation on a mine. It's not going to return it to its original state, but it's going to make it so it's usable for some other purpose in the future and not just abandoned. So that's the whole point of that provision. So there would be some time frame established for those growers who are no longer allowed to continue to grow to stop and to rehabilitate the land and make it usable for some other purpose.
As written, it's 180 days after inaction for the remediation piece, 90 days to comply with not continuing to grow. So, two separate timelines, one for remediation, one for stopping operations.
Thank you. I couldn't remember the exact time frames.
Okay, let's consider if it was put to a vote of the people, a ban initiative, if you will, and it fails, what happens then?
Then we continue to operate under the urgency ordinance until February 14th. And then
Of
we have
2018.
nothing- Of 2018, and then we have nothing on the books unless we can adopt something in the meantime. Now, we could utilize the same EIR, I believe, for some other alternative as long as it's within the parameters that we've established for that EIR. So it's possible that if there were an election to ban it, the ban fails, we could be in a position then to hold hearings and adopt some other ordinance. But the time frame then is very narrow to get that done by February. Unless we were to adopt another urgency ordinance that differs from the one that we adopted before. But we'd have to make new findings, under whatever the circumstances are at the time, and that would be something we'd have to work on very carefully to make sure that it meets all the requirements of the urgency ordinance. We cannot extend the original one, first one. We cannot use that. those same findings again, to extend it beyond the 2 years or the time frame that was established by the board.
Okay, final question. If we defeat the ban initiative and we don't do anything and we reach our February 14th, 2018 deadline, what happens then?
We go back to where we were 15 months ago with no regulation other than the permissive zoning provisions that say in our zoning code you're only allowed to do those things that are listed in our code, in the zone. That is what we've based our statement that you cannot grow except under the, let me rephrase that. Before we adopted the urgency ordinance, we were saying that cultivation of cannabis is illegal because it is not permitted in our zone. That's not a very strong position to be in.
Thank you, Mr. Morrow. I hope we've explored some options there. Supervisor Tofinelli.
Getting back to Peter and Megan or Julie, if an initiative gets on the ballot and it's a ban and it gets defeated, we have the ability to take the current ordinance that is being done now is going to be presented after the EIR comments that are addressed to the Planning Commission and then to this board. We have the ability to add to that regulations to that ordinance. Is that not correct?
That's correct, yes.
And it's a time frame, let me finish the question, and the time frame, depending on what those regulations that this board sets down, could be either a very short period of time or it could be 60 days or so before you get that adjusted to what the majority of the board wants. And then you would make sure that those are within the parameters of the EIR before you then present it to the Planning Commission and then it comes to this board with their comments. Correct?
Theoretically correct.
And I think
never done it before.
In terms of how much change the board could ask for within the scope of our EIR, because the EIR encompasses a variety of alternatives ranging from strict regulation all the way to a ban, as long as there was no wild card in the recommendations and it was somewhere on that sliding scale of different options that have been studied, as long as it's been studied already, then we should be able to make those adjustments.
So my point is, if this board goes down the path of putting something on the ballot in November and it gets defeated in November, then the time frame before February, we would be pushing it by using the ordinance that we have written now, but we could make it before the urgency ordinance elapses.
Supervisor Tofinelli, I'll answer that question. And speaking with Ms. Turner, November is the only time frame to hold the election before February. So that August 1st deadline would be on us to get an adopted ordinance or initiative to the elections office to be placed on the ballot, whether it was the draft ban that we have already completed or some variation of that. We still have to have CEQA completed, and that is the question. Is I don't believe that we would be able to have the entire CEQA process completed by that August 1st deadline to make it on a November ballot. That's my concern, is the timelines and the restrictions and limitations that we have with the elections office and placing something on the ballot for November.
Mr. Maurer, looks like you need to say something about that.
No, I'm just really thinking about what Megan had just said. And,
CEQA could not be completed in that time frame.
I don't believe we can.
Okay.
I really don't.
Further questions? Further comments? Hearing none? I guess this meeting's, okay.
I asked this at the end of our last.
My microphone.
Sorry. I asked this at the end of the last meeting. Is there any circumstance under which we want to start discussing regulation? I poll myself, yes.
You're asking for a poll of the board?
I am.
Okay. Supervisor Clapp, do you wish to discuss any type of regulation?
I say we should just, if we should go to vote, if we vote for a ban, the other side has a right to bring the issue to the voters.
Can you talk into your mic, please, so everybody can hear what you're saying?
I know.
No, my decision is I think we've already pulled the board enough times. I think everyone knows pretty well what the position is. For us to, I'm against for us putting an initiative out for the people. I don't think initiatives are good. I think Prop C was a disaster. We're locked into something. I don't think we should be locking, because I don't think we'll be here in 15 years or 5 years, and I don't want to lock the next board coming behind us to then be locked into a decision that we made. You know, so if we make the decision, if they don't like the decision, they can vote me out, put someone in, and change the decision. Prop C is we're stuck with. We can't change it. It has the fees structured already, and I think they're way too low. And pulling the board again, I don't see the point. I mean, I think that we should just make our vote when it comes up, and if the ban wins, then I think the other party can get an initiative on the ballot themselves.
Supervisor Mills?
Staff has been working since January to follow board's direction, and I appreciate the effort that they've put into what they've done. It has not been easy. For us to suddenly do any kind of course corrections to that right now, I think hamstrings the staff and will create some complications that may not be easily overcome. We put this together and we don't put it on the ballot, this board and future boards will have some ability to modify or to make structural changes as the need arises. Folks, if you put this on the ballot, it's locked. There won't be any other changes except to go back to the ballot again. And so with the fluid nature of what's going on in Sacramento, that's not helping us. And we need to be able to have some fluidity in our discussion and not to be locked down by an initiative to say it's off the table. You can't do anything about it. And so that's a grave fear. I would just like us to continue on the track we're on, get this done. If those that want to regulate feel that they have a good plan in place and they want to bring it before the voters and they can sell it, so be it. But knowing what I know about what we've got to this point, I think the board's direction has been clear. I don't see that it's changed, and I hope that it won't. We get this done.
Okay, thank you. Supervisor Tofinelli?
Well, again, my stance was nothing in residential zoning, which includes anything that has an R in it, RR, R1, R5, R10, R20. And I made that clear today. Going down the path of the ban, when we voted the ban in, the ban was a starting point. We got to stop somewhere. We got to stop this madness. I'm still in favor of stopping the madness till we get a grasp on it. I do have a couple other questions, and it has to do with county council and not stopping the process as we're going forward. I know there's frustration on this board on both sides of this issue, and some of the frustration on the one side has been the length of time, because I'm sure they've heard it from their constituents, and we've heard it many times here in the boardroom about why isn't it done, why isn't it done going forward. So I understand not putting any more pressure on staff or anything to delay anything going forward in the position on that. But my question to Megan or Julie, representing County Council, would be if there was discussions today on adding specific items to this ordinance, such as 600 acres, anything smaller than 600 acres or 100 acres, what have you, or having a CUP attached to it if you're if we agreed to some type of acreage or something. If we added things in today, would we be able to add that into the context of the ordinance and have it prepared in time for the EIR when it's finished and presented?
A lot of it depends on exactly what the direction is. If it's something simple like we just want to increase setbacks, that would be a relatively small impact. I mean, the writing of the change in the ordinance would be very quick. I would analyze to see whether our findings are still accurate. But if there's something that requires more legal research or more justification, then it could take a lot longer. It's very content dependent. Most of the time, something like we want to increase acreage, if we're going to reduce impacts by not having any residential areas, I'd have to talk with Peter about the comments we received and whether we'd have to address them somewhat differently from a CEQA perspective based on how that might impact traffic, et cetera. But I don't, so I'll let Peter speak to the EIR process. But as far as drafting, it all depends on how specific.
How much specific
and how much
complex.
that would impact findings that we've made. So small adjustments that are technical, like distance and height and what have you, are very easy to make quickly. If there are major changes in terms of switching directions from what we have already prepared, it could take a little bit longer.
I would just add that as long as the direction is abundantly clear to staff exactly what it is that you would like to see, I think that staff could modify it to address that direction in a similar time frame of what planning will be working under with responding to the EIR comments. I do think that as far as modifying because we have a multitude of versions of ordinances dating back to many years ago that we can pull from. I do think that as long as the direction is clear, we can make those changes fairly quickly and within the same time frames as Peter's been working on or will be working on with responding to the EIR comments.
And just one other comment is that when we drafted the regulatory ordinance of the subject of the EIR, that was prior to some significant changes in state law, especially adult use of marijuana act. So there will have to be some adjustments to a regulatory ordinance to bring it current. The ban ordinance was done after the passed, and so it addresses the state law minimum requirements. So we will have to make some adjustments for state law compliance to a regulatory ordinance.
And I would agree with council on that. As long as you can articulate what it is you are trying to accomplish by adding a new parcel size or change in zoning or any other standards, you can say this addresses noise or this addresses smell or traffic, then I think it would be very easy to incorporate that and the findings into the final action as well as the drafting of the standards themselves. So as far as how it fits in with the EIR process, if we were to go to a more strict regulatory ordinance, that could fit into the EIR as it is prepared today and as we continue to work on it. Unless it's something that's totally out of anything that we've looked at under the EIR, and I can't think of anything that hasn't been and that we would conceivably put into an ordinance to address the impacts that we're trying to address. It would all fit in the context of the EIR that we have already.
I have another question for Peter. Peter, do you know by chance how many indoor grows are permitted right now?
Off the top of my head, I do not know.
5, 3, 6, 10, 12, 100?
I would say it's probably between 5 and 15.
And the sizes of them, they vary?
They vary. Most of the indoor cultivation sites are quite a bit smaller than the outdoor. The average outdoor cultivation was about 15,000 square feet, and I would guess that the average indoor cultivation is probably around 5,000 square feet.
Are they located in any specific zones?
Most of them are in industrial zones, if I recall correctly. We have a lot of mixed use in the rural ag zones, mixed light, where we've got, part indoor, part outdoor operation, where they start indoors and they move them outdoors. But a complete indoor operation is primarily in the commercial industrial areas.
So if you drove past them, you wouldn't even know what was going on inside the building? If it's an industrial type building?
The one that I've been to, I would not have known it was there.
Okay. All right. That's a fair enough statement. Thank you.
Supervisor Tofinelli, on the poll,
On the poll?
what's your position?
I'm in favor at this point, finding that if we do any modifications to this at this point, then it's going to delay the progress, and I would love to get this thing done and settled as soon as possible. So perhaps as things come forward, we can maybe readdress some of these things. I think if all of the supervisors are open to that, I see Supervisor Mills shaking his head yes. So I think the imperative thing is right now is to continue moving forward and see what Mr. Maurer has in his time frame as we go forward. Perhaps he can report back to us on the 27th how close he is to addressing the comments on the EIR and keep us posted on that, and whether there's any objections or that have substantial standing in it that we need to readdress. So we know going forward, we have some idea in our mind when it's actually going to get to the Planning Commission. And then I have some questions that I would like to meet with you in your office on.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah, and I can provide like a weekly update just to see where we're at, keep things going. I guess there's one other thing that we might just want to keep in mind. There is state legislation going through right now that would provide a CEQA exemption. Apparently it's passed both houses and is sitting on the governor's desk for signature that provides exemption under CEQA for an ordinance, any local ordinance that requires discretionary review of all cannabis-related activity. And if that passes, if that gets signed, that would change things dramatically as far as what we have to do. It hasn't been signed yet, we don't know.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I just learned about it today, so.
I would just add to that, Mr. Mauer's referring to SB 94. That was something that was, it was just passed, it was read for the third time and passed on to the Senate on the 15th, so that was last Thursday. It has not been signed, so it is not currently in law. But one of the things with that it does provide a CEQA exemption for regulatory programs as long as the regulatory program is providing for discretionary permits. In essence, the CEQA analysis would happen on the tail end, not on the front end, on a programmatic level. So essentially all of the potentially any CUP or basically any operation would be required to get some form of a discretionary permit, whether it be a CUP or other permit that would require a CEQA analysis of that one project. So essentially, rather than doing a ministerial permit, which is what the registration process is, it would be a discretionary permit process, which each and every individual application would have to undergo a CEQA analysis. So.
Come on, speak, Supervisor Garamendi.
Are you done? Yeah, being as it is, I will withdraw my poll. this point. I mean, I'm not sure what we just spent 2 days doing, and we asked lots of people to submit lots of ideas. There's a lot of compromise in the room. I'm honestly disappointed that we were unable to really consider that, considering that, the industry group itself sat forward and said, we will reduce the amount of, we are looking at 250 grows, which would reduce, and that would fund the sheriff's department for the eradication of the illegal grows. That's a 4/5 reduction in the amount of total grows estimated going on in our district. We just spent last week doing the budget, so everybody here is very familiar with the budget and the cliff that we're about to drive off. And I'm sorry that we were unable to convince people that perhaps there's a middle ground. That's all I got.
Thank you. So the poll's been withdrawn? So there's no need to further discuss this? It's my understanding that we will wait till the EIR comes before the board for discussion, and we'll resume at that time. Is that correct?
And I will provide regular updates of where we're at, and if anything new happens, we will certainly advise you of that.
Okay. Council, could you make sure that we follow this bill that's on the governor's desk along with Mr. Maurer? I just heard about that just now, and I'm kind of interested in where that's going to go. Is there anything else? Any comments by staff?
Mr. Chair?
Oh, go ahead, Supervisor.
I do have another question. It has with county council. I had a couple conversations with you, Megan, and I'm not sure if I had any with you, Julie, regarding the urgency ordinance and the verbiage in it as to if we have any regulations at all, no matter what they may be, that we can continue with the funding that's available from the registrations, and we could have registrations for those regulations. Is that correct?
Well, I just want to clarify, a permanent ordinance would be replacing the urgency ordinance. So whatever the permanent ordinance looks like. So if there is, in essence, a ban or a very highly regulated regulatory program, that would be replacing the urgency ordinance. And if it were, my recollection of what we discussed was that it would be an ordinance that had some level of regulation, not a complete ban across the board, and whether that would allow for continued registration fees and the Measure C tax monies. Is that, am I understanding what your question?
Correct.
Okay. So in that situation, that ordinance, we would be putting forward a permanent fee rather than the urgency ordinance fee, and we would be collecting new fees for that regulatory program. And yes, we would continue to use the funds because it's been an ongoing program. And so whether it's more tightly restricted, it's still a program that we are implementing. We've been implementing this for over a year, and it would be a continuation of some version of that. If it goes to a complete ban, then obviously we cannot collect new fees, and we would be looking at what amount of fees, if any, we still had at the time that permanent ordinance was adopted and actually implemented.
Mm-hmm. Well, to that point then, under Prop 64, there is still an ability of the county to have some form of regulation. And the regulation or the recovery of fees would be for us to provide inspections to ensure that Prop 64 is being complied with, whether that be odor control or mold or, is it truly 6 plants? Is it truly indoors? What all that is isn't even in this mix right now, but at some point, that is something we may direct staff in the future to develop some type of a regulatory program and some fee structure to take care of it, so it does have a cost recovery component. if our decision would be that we're going to take Prop 64 and move 6 plants outdoors, all that is still, as long as it stays in front of the board, we're the ones that can have that discussion. If we push this out to the voters, the discussion stops. And that's why I want to be very careful that we spend the time crafting what we want this to be before we even bring a voter initiative into it and have any kind of discussion about it. So there's an opportunity to continue that discussion here and be sure that you gain 3 consensus votes to go in that direction as part of that process.
As I've previously said in prior meetings, and I think this is what Supervisor Tofinelli was also getting at, is whether the Measure C taxes would actually be able to be collected or not. Obviously, if there is a ban, if there's no commercial industry, whether that be cultivation, dispensaries, manufacturing, delivery, whatever that commercial industry is, there's no Measure C taxes. But if there is some level of commercial industry, then Measure C taxes would be collectible.
I wasn't even speaking to Measure C. I was just speaking to the fact of the board will still have to have or could have some discussions surrounding Prop 64, surrounding how that all fits into this. And if there is any kind of oversight, that there can be a fee for service collected. So I just wanted to be sure that that still is on the table. That is still something that we can discuss.
I want to just say that I think we ought to be very cautious about trying to play games and manipulate our position so that we could try to tap into Prop 64 dollars. I think we're going to have plenty of legal problems. We don't need legal problems with the state of California by trying to be cute or game the system. Well, you can't be a little bit pregnant. We either are or we aren't. So I just want everybody to let's not get too clever. If we want to regulate, let's regulate. But let's not say we're regulating when we're not, because that is a ban, and that'll be proven up the street. So let's just be cautious when we have that conversation.
Further comments? I have one concern. How are we going to make this county safe? How are we going to enforce it? Be it ban, be it regulation, how are we going to enforce that? We're going to have to think about that, aren't we? Especially seeing our budget deficit. Don't have any hats, don't have any rabbits. We're down to hard facts, folks. Sheriff, would you approach, please?
The only comment I'd like to make is on Dennis Mills to clarify Prop 64. Because that is a state law for personal use, there are no fees that you can attach to that, period.
So, Sheriff, what happens if we go total ban? How does that affect our enforcement capabilities? And how many people are going to be getting pink slips from your office?
Well, like I said before, the pink slips depend on what you folks decide to do, whether you decide to keep the urgency or if you decide to keep the program going. My position isn't going to change. I'm still going to continue to do what we're doing, which is go after the growers. Whether it slows me down or not, or whether it stops me, falls back upon you folks. If I don't have the personnel, it's going to make it difficult, that I will say. But it's not going to stop us. We will continue moving in a forward direction. It's just how fast forward you want to go.
Okay. Just want to make sure everybody's aware of that. Thank you, Sheriff. Further comments by the board? Further comments by staff?
I'll ask the building department. How much does it cost me?
Supervisor Platt, could you talk into the microphone for us?
How much does it cost me to get a permit for a hot water heater in my house that I already have? Or to get a re-roof permit on my house?
I'd have to look at the currently adopted fee schedule.
But I do pay a fee on both those, do I not?
You don't pay a fee for a water heater that you already have, no.
Oh, really?
If you're replacing the water heater, you're
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about, replacing my hot water heater.
I got you.
I'll hear your point of order. Who declared a point of order? Okay.
Any other questions?
Thank you. You can answer that question, I believe, sir.
On the water heater?
Yeah, I have an existing house, and my hot water heater goes out, or my roof goes bad.
Right.
I have to obtain a permit to get that hot water heater fixed, and I have to obtain a
For a
permit to
change
get...
out, yeah, it's a minimum fee.
Yes.
Just
And
go out,
it's-
just make sure it's safe, that's all.
Yes, and same with my roof, to make sure it's safe.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
I'm sure we had a reason for that. Is there any other comments by staff? Okay. Madam Clerk?
Supervisor announcements. In compliance with AB 1234, chaptered as Government Code Section 53232.3D, this is the time for board members to report on meetings attended on behalf of the county and to carry out their duties as county supervisor.
Would you like to start, Supervisor Tofinelli?
We met with the sheriff yesterday for about 2 hours going over budgets. And as reported out by Supervisor Mills and the CAO, we haven't came to full resolution with that yet. Hopefully by the 27th, when the CAO comes back to us and we adopt the preliminary budget, all of that will be hashed out or ironed out. I have a cash flow analysis and invoice schedule meeting tomorrow at 1:30 here at Government Center with CAO Jeff Grovitz and P&J. I also have a CMCAA meeting scheduled at 8:30 a.m. in Mariposa. You're laughing. That's scheduled for the 22nd, which is Thursday. And then on the 26th, I have the JPA board meeting, which is the, well, actually, it's a teleconference meeting from Sonora, which is the children's, what is that committee, Dennis? That is the Sierra Central Child Support Agency. Yeah. So that's all I have to report.
Supervisor Garamendi?
I will be going to the RCRC board meeting tomorrow and the Golden State Finance Authority meetings. Board meeting is in Sacramento. I will be spending a lot of time trying to figure out how we try to keep our community safe and our services going with no money over the next couple of days.
Supervisor Clapp?
I had a barbecue at Hogan's for Father's Day, and there was over 130 people showed up, even in the hot heat.
Wow, where was my invitation?
Well, I ended up having 20 people from Gary's district come over, so I'm going to send him a bill for those 20 people. He assured me he's going to pay me.
Thank you for feeding my constituents.
I look out for him. I have to cover you now. And I had my road committee and stuff, met with them, and that's about it. It was hot.
Supervisor Mills?
Yeah, last night in Jackson, I spoke with Rocky Deal and others in Congressman McClintock's office about particularly Spicer Reservoir Road and some of the issues with the U.S. Forest Service. He was on a conference call with them yesterday afternoon wanting to expedite. And so I have put before a request to bring forth an agenda item as a letter of support to the congressman to that is our tourist area. We need those reservoir roads open so we can make use of them. If not for that, for safety, for fires, there's many of those roads, as you know, they're still under snow, and they don't have any idea. So it's either that or we just sit back and wait for them to possibly get it done in 2018. That's not going to work. The other thing is I will be testifying at the request of the California Special District Association in Sacramento on Thursday with the Little Hoover Commission on the value and the benefits that special districts bring to counties. And I'm very much looking forward to that opportunity to speak on their behalf, and also being on LAFCO and some of the things of how that plays in as to the financial capabilities as well as the structural capabilities that they provide us. Because think of, if those special districts weren't working, who would be doing that job? Who would be overseeing that work? It'd be right here. And I'm not so certain as that's really a smart thing to do in terms of our focus. We have enough to focus on. So that's all I have for now.
Thank you, Supervisor Mills. I have just one meeting. I attended last night. I was also scheduled to meet with Congressman McClintock, but I was diverted to White Pines Park Committee meeting, and I'm going to leave with just a surprisingly good note, but I'm not going to take the thunder away from Jeff Krovis, who was very instrumental in making some leaps and bounds in that project over the last 48 hours. It's good things, and I'm going to let him report that out at our next board meeting when he brings an agendized item up. With that, staff?
Mr. Chair, you're not going to report where you were Saturday and Sunday night? Were you?
I made bail and I got out, okay? No. I actually, I did go to a concert, and with Supervisor Tofinelli happens to be there. And I just realized how old I was with John Cougar Mellencamp. But it was a good time. Took a little R&R, folks. Thanks, Gary. I owe you one.
You're welcome, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, that'll conclude the meeting.